allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice, that was a resounding pledge.
Waiting a second. Okay, good. All right. Okay, so as usual, I usually start off the meeting with anybody from the public who just wants to speak on something that's not on the agenda. My request to anyone who wants to speak today is you need to be very, very brief because we have a very long agenda, and I also have it programmed so that we have an hour for Community Housing Board because some people need to leave for that. We've got someone coming in at 2:00 to talk about property reassessment. We've got the consultants coming in from the comp plan to talk about the GIS at 2:30. So I need to stay on track. So with that, Mike Gaynor, you put your name on the list.
Hi there, Mike Gaynor, 8 Cobbetts Lane, and I will keep this very short. I sincerely appreciate it. So 2 weeks ago, I'm a neighbor directly abutting Sylvester Manor, as everybody knows, and I had reported that Sylvester Manor is in existence without a special permit, and that the town was aware of that, and that you were going to be investigating that. And I spoke about that again last week. Since last week, I have a team of people who are helping me work on this, and we went down the rabbit hole on, there's another property that Sylvester Manor owns that also does not have a special permit that they are aware of. Sylvester Manor back in 2022 purchased 82 Ferry Road, North Ferry Road. So Sylvester Manor, the entirety of the 243 acres is 80 North Ferry Road. They purchased for $2.2 million. They purchased 80 North Ferry Road, which is completely ensconced, but it is a separate lot inside of Sylvester Manor Educational Farm. And that property has no special permit in place. And when you look at the totality of facts surrounding that, it just becomes kind of difficult to process how that happened. Here's from the Sylvester Manor's annual report. Now, this won't take a second. This is what they wrote inside of their annual report last year after they purchased that property. Historically, a succession of farmers and property caretakers lived in the old farmhouse. That was the house they bought. Now it is slated for renovation and will serve a number of crucial functions that include multi-use facilities for educational programs, staff and participants, administrative offices. None of these uses are allowed inside of a AA zone without a special permit. At the time, Benjamin Diet was the president of Sylvester Manor, and he was on their board. Or you were a trustee.
Hey, I was not president of Sylvester Manor.
In 2019 for that transaction. I'm sorry, you were the treasurer. 2019 is when they went into discussions about that, and 2022 you closed. You were the treasurer at that time. I apologize.
No, I was never treasurer.
I'm just going to keep this on.
No problem. I'll keep it moving. Okay, well then, if Ben's not enough, then Kathleen Gerard, who sits on our Community Preservation Fund. She was on the board and she was in charge of their buildings and zoning department. So the last time I presented this information about 80 North Ferry Road, you were concerned about where you could get information about these particular properties, who you could speak to. Kathleen Gerard would certainly be somebody. She was on the board. She's on the Community Preservation Fund. She's a very knowledgeable person. She understands land use. They deployed $2.2 million on a property. That didn't happen by accident. A lot of thought went behind that. They have a 17-person board. So somebody must have known that that was what the uses that they could have used that $2.2 million house for. In addition to that, when I had referenced earlier 2015 about that transaction, about who you might be able to speak with, the director at that point in time in 2015 was Joanne Robati, who sits on our Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee right next to Meg. And so she would certainly know why they didn't have a special permit at that point. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day.
So the first agenda item, is there anybody else? I'm sorry, come on up, Peter. Again, please be brief.
Yep. Hi, Peter Reese. I'll be very brief. First meeting I've been to in person in a very long time. And just want to commend you, Amber, for a couple of meetings I've watched parts of, for bringing civility and transparency to the board and getting agendas out nice and early.
My goal is every Friday to
I'm
the agenda out.
basically here because I'm hearing from a lot of people around town. They want to find out why the board is kind of deadlocked on a lot of things. And they've asked a couple of us past elected officials come up and want to hear what's going on. Let's try to figure out why and see if we can kind of answer. One other little thing, I did sign up for Notify Me yesterday, and I haven't gotten it yet. It says I confirmed the email, so I didn't get notice of this. You know, it didn't get sent to me. I mean, it's going to be a great thing. I don't know if it's just a little time getting it up and running, or it takes a little while for it to kick in, maybe. Yeah,
I'll
thank you.
kick you to Chris, I was gonna say, I'll kick you to Christina. Yeah, sure.
Peter?
Yeah.
Good to see you again. I haven't seen you in ages. Do you have issues that people are asking about, or is it a generic question? I'm not really sure.
Generic questions more. I'm hearing that the boards, that they're not happy reading stuff in the report about the deadlocks and stuff. And you kind of feel that that's going to be a continuing thing. And I figured, well, coming up to see for myself.
Okay.
Anyone else in the physical audience who wishes to speak on a non-agenda topic? Anybody on Zoom? Non-agenda topics. Okay. So first item on the agenda then is Community Housing Board's presentation on potential housing units. I don't know if Liz, Chairman of Community Housing Board, take the lead on this. I don't know if you want to stand at the podium or if you want to join us at the table.
Yeah,
whichever.
I can, whatever's easiest. Fran and Maria are actually gonna be presenting. Or maybe should I stand there? I don't know. I'm like, oh, okay. Whatever's most
Whatever works for you.
Right, you're in the shot there, so that's good.
Okay, I was like, I just want to be wherever I'm supposed to be. That's what I'm trying to do. So we're really excited today to present some of our ideas for some options for the housing that we're looking at. So just as a refresher, what we're looking at today is we are working hard on an RFP for a 10-unit scattered site rental project. And so what we're going to be looking at today is potential designs for these units. As our council has pointed out, they need to be designed before we put them out to for the RFP. So our board, specifically Bran and Maria, have been working really hard to put this together for us. But again, like I said, I just wanted to, just a refresher, what we were looking at is an RFP for 10 units, 6 one-bedroom units at the South Ferry site, that's behind the Historical Society, 2 two-bedroom units on the town property on North Ferry, and what's the other?
Van
Waring, sorry, totally blanked. 2 two-bedroom units on Van Waring. And just for, I know people have asked to be like, why are you doing it in so many sites and why is it 10 units? And well, first of all, it's in line with our housing plan. And additionally, it's the only way we could get the numbers to because at 10 units, we qualify for a $200,000 subsidy per unit from the county. David Doyle and I have spent a lot of time mathing the math, and without that subsidy, we don't see a path forward. So just as a refresher, just to get started, and I'm going to turn it over to Bran and Maria to talk about design.
Hi. I know this is the fun part. So we've got a slideshow that we're going to share with you guys about our ideas for our RFP design option. As Liz mentioned, we can't turn in an RFP without designs. And there are many, many, many designs out there. We've narrowed them down. And so we'll take a look.
So these are our sites, 12 South Ferry, 69 North Ferry, and 16 Van Waring. I have a breakdown of the acreage and what, according to Suffolk County Health and our engineer, we understand to be the kind of configurations we can put on those. The site, the GIS photos there are to represent the site. The other things on the side are sort of site plans that were developed by Michael Shatkin, a long time ago, so they're not accurate. It says draft on top of them. No one should take that as a plan for the sites. They're just kind of to represent, we will be working on that with these correct numbers of buildings at some point. That's part of our RFP process. So the next slide is an example that we were looking at of community housing on Martha's Vineyard. It's called Eliakim's Way. It's done by the Island Housing Trust. And this is a, pocket neighborhood of 8 single-family homes. Some of the land was preserved, and these were sold to residents there, selling between 150 and 300K.
This is 3.5 acre site.
Okay, the next one is another sort of pocket neighborhood. This is not affordable housing, but it's a very successful housing development in Concord, Massachusetts, done by Union Studio Architects. And again, it's like small homes from 1,300 to 1,700 square feet. They preserved about 50% of their acreage as open space, and the houses are all very energy efficient. So those are just kind of examples of what we see out there that we think are good, good models to follow.
Yeah.
This unit is a duplex 2-bedroom. It's called the Side Hustle House, and this was actually designed by Union Studio Architects that we just saw the project from. This was designed as affordable housing, and it has a base model that can expand in a number of different ways. In this configuration, what we would do is add on what they call a tail unit to the back of the first floor. So that's a 1-bedroom apartment on the bottom floor, and the second floor is its own separate 1-bedroom apartment. We would consider this for South Ferry Road, putting 3 of these on South Ferry, and then you'd have 6 units and 6 bedrooms in 3 buildings.
Mhm.
So you're going to see a lot of options here. Hopefully you can make sense of it all. We're going to see this again, and we're going to see a couple other models again, because they're all could be 1 or 2 bedrooms. And we could use them on many sites. So the next slide. This is called the M-Line. This was developed by South Mountain Company architects, and this is used on what has been used on Martha's Vineyard for affordable housing. It was developed specifically for that purpose. It's kind of a little cottage style house, and this could be a 1-bedroom. It's about 800 square feet. The next one. This one.
Sure. So this is another example of the cottage idea. This was also, as you can see from the picture on the right, that this was a neighborhood of similarly small houses. These are configured as 1-bedroom homes, and they can be, in terms of style, they can go in a couple of directions. They also fall into the affordable housing idea. What we learned, of course, in terms of design is the less frou-frou stuff you have on your house, the more affordable it's going to be. And this also gives you a sense of how little houses can be configured next to each other. That's the picture on the right.
Okay, so the next one. Okay, so this is a 2-bedroom unit. This is, again, the Side Hustle House by Union Studio Architects. Without the tail unit, it could be configured as a 2-bedroom upstairs, and the downstairs would be living, dining, and kitchen. It's about a little over 1,000 square feet. And we could put these on North Ferry Road and Menwaring. So it could be a configuration of 2 of these.
This is another one of the 2-bedroom units. This is from,
I think it's just, the site is called Architectural Design.
yeah, Architectural Designs. So it's kind of off the shelf. But
Yeah.
as you can see, it's another 2-bedroom unit that is similarly cottage oriented. That was our idea for the majority of our design ideas. They fit really the vernacular of Shelter Island. They're attractive, they're not complex, but they provide a lot of light, air, space, and fit into the environment. This is a 2-bedroom unit. As you can see, there's 2 bedrooms on 1 floor.
The next one?
This is another 2-bedroom. This is from a company called Go Logic in Maine that built houses also for affordable housing in Martha's Vineyard. And as you can see from this one, this is a much larger space. This is a little over 1,000 square feet and 2 bedrooms. This one happens to be designed in such a way that it takes advantage of sunlight and for both heating and cooling. So it's particularly advanced in terms of its environmental impact. And this would be which site?
This would also be Manwaring.
Manwaring, yeah, for
and
the 2
North
bedroom.
Ferry. So, okay, this is another version of the M line. The photos that we have, they'll all look similar because these were kind of taken on one project, and I think those are actually 3 bedrooms. So, but you'll notice that the plans are different for the M lines. This is a 2-bedroom. The bedrooms are back on the right side of that. And it's a little bit bigger, a little under 1,000 square feet. So if we could, for example, use M lines everywhere, we could do 6 of them at South Ferry, and then 2 each at the other properties, which would be 2 bedrooms. So you could do a mix of 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms. But it's sort of a similar plans. Then the builder could be purchasing all the same materials, doing the same thing over and over again. Hopefully cut down some costs.
Yeah.
The next slide, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
That's our slide chart.
Cool.
Very good.
And so, we want to bring these forward, for your feedback as a board, just like, are we headed, we've obviously put a lot of thought into this. Are we headed the right direction? And then also additionally to start to, ultimately we kind of need to select, right? A design for South Ferry and a design for the 4 2 bedrooms. And so we want to partner with you guys, for your feedback, but also in thinking about how to open up this process so that the public can give feedback. Like I said, Brandon and Marie have done an amazing job really thinking deeply about this and trying to line up the choices that we brought forward with things that we heard when we were putting together the community housing plan and just the feedback that we've gotten at our meetings, and just trying in general to match the Shelter Island, architectural vernacular, like make it fit in. And at the same time, we want it to fit in, and, try to look for efficiencies. Like, is there a way, like the side hustle house? I like that one a lot. But, in doing something like that design or the M line that Brian and Maria put forward, by building a lot of very similar homes, maybe, mixed up slightly for each, to be customized for each location, we can build in efficiencies, thus lowering our costs for the project. So just trying to think about both those things, it fitting in, providing quality of life for the residents, and then with an eye to budget, right? So yeah, is there any questions that you guys have for,
I can't see you. I didn't have.
Yeah.
It's hiding behind you. My only question is, do we have plans to make some of the first floor easily accessible, like ADA compliant, kind of accessible?
So there's only, the side hustle house is the only one that has 2 floors.
Okay.
So I would say that the only part that would not be ADA accessible would be if we decided on the
Upstairs, downstairs.
the upstairs, downstairs ones.
Yeah, that was really, like, we were looking for a lot of single floor ones, but then at the South Ferry site especially, we thought about just reducing the footprint
So we could have more green space, so it's like kind of like,
Yeah, I
Balancing.
don't have a problem with the upstairs, downstairs, as long as one of them is accessible.
yeah, so one of
they
the,
all
so
are.
the bottom, so there, you know, let's say for instance, we went with that side hustle house at South Ferry, that was the design that was chosen, then 3 of the units would be ADA accessible, and then the 3 would be second story and would not be.
Or at least, we hope they would be. I think you would have to work with an architect to
Yeah.
make sure they are. You know,
Yeah.
There's probably other requirements rather than it just being a first floor.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, you know, talk
Just have
about,
to have easy access in, make
Yeah.
sure the hallways are wide enough to accommodate
Exactly.
chairs, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
You can turn around, but the county grant you're looking for does that not require ADA accessibility?
The county monies, I'd have to double check, but I don't think that all the units, but a portion of the units must be. But I let me double check on that and get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there plans for basements in these homes?
We
we have
don't,
to look into the foundation plans. I think
Yeah.
we're looking kind of just for something off the shelf. That I think a lot of them are, the idea is a
Yeah.
slab,
I
but
mean, the houses are small and people have stuff
yeah.
right, so, yeah, the only thing.
that, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of a basement. The one thing that kind of would we want to take into consideration is would we be able to stay within budget in constructing a basement?
I will say that a number of these designs can also accommodate garages. We did not show garages in some of these, but all of them can accommodate an attached garage. We just thought that they were mostly ugly. So we decided to go with something that was a little bit more aesthetically pleasing.
The thing is, the garage will answer the basement question.
Correct, that's why I'm saying, yeah.
We have a bunch of
stuff.
contractors in the.
Yeah,
No, we actually have also,
We'll have, yes.
if you have specific questions, Chris Joaquin has agreed to answer any general, you know, around the cost of a basement or, you know, how much, you know.
But also, Albert, to your
Oh,
point,
yeah.
we're kind of just looking at, you know, just on the internet, these plans, we don't have access to the actual plans yet, we'd have to buy them. But I think all of them could also be customized down the
Yeah.
line.
I mean, I'm not interrogating,
Yeah.
I think people have stuff and the
Oh,
houses are small.
I know.
It would be nice to
We
have
all do,
a
yes.
couple of cages in a basement or a
Yeah.
garage broken up.
Right, good idea.
If it's a 2-family just for storage.
I think one of the next steps with developing all of these is to do kind of that site plan for each and figure out how to develop those kind of efficiencies, like among the houses. Is there, you know, is there a shared, is something shared? Is there, you know, a unit? Is there a park, you know, where is the parking? How does it all work?
Yeah.
And how do we accommodate for, Manwaring has kind of a path through to the nursery property, which we want to preserve. So there's a lot of factors we have to kind of weigh with
Is there
planners.
like not a hard schedule, but an idea, like you want to start at Manwaring or North Ferry and start small with two or?
This is such a great question. David Doyle and I have spent so much time working on the math. It's actually a math question, is what you're asking. So like I said, to qualify for that county money, right, we have to package this together as 10 units, right? So, I mean, I can't imagine just logistically that you would be able to build all of them at the same time, just, you know, but it would be, in fact, we would put out the RFP for all 10 units at the same time. But yeah, I don't know what the building schedule would be. I would imagine you would build one site and then you would build them, you know, again, that would be at the.
I know that's down the road,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just curious.
yeah.
But not too long of a road.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking, as like Liz said, this is part of our community housing plan, which was a look at 5 years. So when we revisit that community housing plan, 5 years from last year, we'd like to have these done.
Yeah.
And be moving on to the next thing.
Like it.
Other questions?
Yes, what I'd like to talk about is timetable.
Yeah,
So you're bringing this to us. I would like at some point in the future, there be a public, open house with plans posted around. So
Yeah.
part of, I think, some of the questions that will come from that is estimates on costs. So if you're looking at, like, these were the ones that you selected, that you distilled it down to, just since you don't have plans, it can't be a real hard cost,
Great.
but an estimate of what each one would be to see if that further knocks out any.
Great,
Yeah.
so that is such a tricky question and such a great one. So glad you asked it, because even though he's not here, we have a financial whiz on our board who's actually done the calculations, not based on particular plans, but on building cost per square footage, plus like building in the cost of the septics and you know what I mean? Like it's actually this is what he does professionally. So we're very lucky to have him. So we do have costs for basically general building in this range of square footage, right? So what I would think that we would do is we would be looking at the deltas off of that. If something were much smaller, maybe it would come in close, towards the bottom of the range that we'd put together. And if it was like maybe 200 square foot higher, it would be on the top. The other thing that is a mitigating factor is by the time today and the day we break ground, it's hard to know what material costs are. So we're always dealing in estimates. Now, the other thing to remember is that the way that we have this RFP set up, and we are just starting to work with our lawyer to put together that final RFP, is that the town would not be paying for any of this. Right. So that's really the important thing to know. So the reason that the cost is important is it's important to, when we put it out to bid, that it needs to make financial sense to whoever's doing it, right? No one's going to take on a project that you're not going to be able to collect enough rents to service the debt to build it. Why would you do that? That's just, as with interest rates at 8%, you could park it in a CD and make that kind of money, right? So it has to at least do that, some kind of reasonable rate of return. So the financial question is not necessarily for the town, because the town is going to put in any money. The contribution that the town would be putting in this situation would be a long-term land lease, basically where the town would continue to own the land that these were built on, and then the developers, the builders, would own the leasehold improvements on them and collect rents on them to service the debt. We would be working with council to figure out, right of refusal. So we would have the first, ability to buy them back, and kind of figuring out what that contract's going to look like in a way that protects the town. But ultimately, the town will not be putting in any money. That was David and my big idea. But it has to make sense to make it work. And that's why the finances are important, because no one's going to take on a deal that doesn't make sense.
In thinking about, just continuing to step this through.
Yeah.
So you all need time to just pull together what that open house would look like, so that we can schedule it.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
the public just needs to be reminded that we're going to be buying off-the-shelf plans that can be modified slightly, but once we make a selection, like that's what we're locking in. So we can get all these ideas thrown at us, and you can then look to see if one particular plan sort of fits in with what the community feels, but we're not going to be able to design to everybody's wishes.
Exactly.
So I just want to get that out
No,
there.
yeah.
Make that public.
Yeah, no.
It's
Setting
not,
expectations.
right, it's not like a design competition where we're commissioning something. We're trying to just find something anyone can build, and we can, start breaking ground.
And so, our kind of thought on timeline, which is such an excellent question, was that first we wanted to bring it to you guys, to the town board. Maybe you're just like, I hate the M line, like, don't do it, like, take that off, or maybe there's one that you particularly like, or maybe, we wanted to come to you and tell you what we're up to. This is what we're working on. And, as we're doing these kind of parallel processes of working on finalizing our RFP, we also, by the time we get that finalized, which take us a minute, but we're working on it. Hopefully by the summer. At the same time, the parallel processes, we want to make sure that we're finalizing this design. What feels, I feel, I don't know, emotionally right is to maybe make that open house a little further into the season to make sure that all of our residents are back, because we want everyone to be able to kind of
To know what we're doing.
have their say,
Yeah.
right?
I agree.
Is there any other questions that you have for us, or comments or feedback?
Any more from this table?
No. I think what you've shown so far is great, and thank you so much for the work you've done, and I appreciate the expertise you guys are developing and the sensitivity you're showing to the community. And I just want to encourage you to keep going.
We will, we will.
Outstanding, really, very much appreciated, all you guys' efforts, honestly.
Great.
All right, well, thanks so much.
Before you go, I was just going to see if there's anyone in the audience who
Oh,
had
yeah,
any questions.
yeah,
Hey, come on up.
yeah. Oh,
You have to come up to the podium.
Right, you gotta give him, we can scoot over here.
Hi, Peter Reese again. They all look great, the houses. Couple of just comments have been built over,
Yeah.
all over 100 houses on the island, and I don't have many accessory buildings and accessory sleeping. The squarer a building is,
Mhm.
the less lineal feet of wall per square foot.
Yeah.
The more rectangular something is,
Yeah,
the more, so which just equates to more materials, more cost. That was one thing. And is the plan at each lot, how many, is there gonna be like one septic serving multiple buildings and one well serving
yes,
multiple
that's,
buildings?
yes.
That's kind of the plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the
Yeah.
plan.
All right, that was kind of it. Thanks.
Anyone else in the physical audience? Anyone on Zoom have questions?
I have a question.
Oh, great.
I have a question. My question is, as part of our relationship with the community, I'm hoping that we'll definitely have an open house, but that our designs would be available on our town website so that people can access them if they don't come like the way we did our community housing plan stuff or.
Yeah, we already, I sent this to Christina, this will go up, and then
Great.
when we do the materials for it, we'll put it up like we did before.
Yeah, we can have it on the community housing board.
Yeah,
Site, okay.
all right.
Good. And I didn't see any Zoom hands go up.
Oh my gosh.
Here,
I feel-
ahead of my schedule.
I'm excited, but excited. Okay. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you all very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I see Judith and John are here. So the next agenda item is talking about the property, reassessment. So we have Judith Mansky, our town assessor, and John Wallman, who is from the New York State Department of Taxation Finance, down from Albany to talk to us about assessments, revals, things like that.
Yes. So this past year, we have been working very diligently to try to do a revaluation of the entire town. And it hasn't been done now for 3 years, and that task has proved to be far greater than we had originally anticipated. So at this point, we are hoping to do the reassessment for 24, 25 now, instead of now this year for 24. We ran the numbers this year, and we didn't have enough time to meet the deadlines after we had done the numbers. So John's gonna discuss a little bit more about that, and this is John Wallman, who's from the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance.
Thanks, Judith, and thank you to the board for the opportunity. As Judith said, I work with the Office of Real Property Tax Services, which is part of New York State Tax and Finance. I will say, we don't do the stuff that people don't like, the audits or anything like that. We work with communities on property tax administration, which, as I think everybody knows all too well, the county, town, school, village, et cetera, you just got a bill in December. So that speaks to why we're working with the town. As Judith mentioned, Shelter Island had been reassessing annually from 1999 through 2021. So this was a very, very regular process. So why do reassessment? Essentially, property tax in New York State and more or less throughout the country and throughout the world is based on property value. In other words, the idea is that people are supposed to pay property tax proportionate to their property value. So if property assessments, which the town has to publish annually, are not reset on a regular basis, with annual really being the gold standard, some people will always end up paying more or less than they actually should. That's what reassessment is all about. Our role is full value measurement. For anyone who's listening, who's heard the term equalization rates, we have to issue those annually. So for Shelter Island, equalization rate would come into play for, let's say, something like county apportionment. How much of the county tax do town residents contribute to the county, and so on. So at the end of the day, we want to work with communities that reassess, because frankly, that's the best measure of achieving equity. The equalization rate really only looks at aggregate value. It doesn't look at individual property value. A reassessment does. And that's the process that ensures equity to the greatest extent possible in individual tax bills. But we want to be able to confirm the town's level of assessment. In doing the reassessment, the town is going to state a level of 100%, which simply means that the town's values represent 100% value as of the valuation date. As Judith said, this project will now be implemented for the 2025 goal. That'll have a valuation date of July 1st, 2024. So value is measured as of that point in time. But there again, we want to be able to confirm that the town's role is within a reasonable tolerance of 100. So we would end up issuing an equalization rate of 100 for the town. That's our role in this. So as the project proceeds, Judith, of course, is still doing some work reviewing inventory. She got a great many responses from the inventory data mailers that had been sent out. It's going to be very soon for the tentative roll to be filed May 1st. So Judith will have a lot of work preparing for that, processing exemptions and so forth, having grievance day the fourth Tuesday or the third Tuesday here in May. And then at that point, shortly after that in the summer, we will hopefully be working with Judith on a series of analyses, perhaps reviewing neighborhood codes, land tables, things of that nature, doing testing with the goal of rerunning the values that Judith mentioned, hopefully, let's say late summer or early fall. That would enable Judith to have a fairly, I want to say, leisurely period of time through the end of calendar year 24 to review all those values, because the town is essentially doing a reappraisal reassessment, which involves looking at the values of each individual property. Once that's set, the town, because of the lapse in time since the last reassessment, the town is legally obligated to go through a process known as assessment disclosure. Quite simply, what that is, it's a comparison. It is not a prediction of future taxes. What it will do is it will look at the most recently extended tax levies, which would be the town, county, and school tax that would have been issued in the bills December of 2024. And again, compressing a lot of detail here, the goal would really be to say, all right, look, we know the actual assessments that were used to generate those taxes. We know what the actual taxes were. So now, if hypothetically all of the new preliminary 2025 assessments were used to raise the same tax levies, here's what the distribution would look like. So it's not a prediction of future taxes. It is meant to try to give people an idea of how the reassessment might affect them going forward. And again, that's a process of analysis that'll be going on, let's say, the latter part of January into February, and hopefully sometime, maybe mid-February or thereabouts, we'd be having another meeting like this with the board to explain the results of that process. The follow-up to that would be individual notices that are mailed to every property owner so they get to see their new assessment, what that might mean for them. And then there would be a period where Judith and the folks who work with her would hold informal review meetings so that if anyone felt their assessment was not correct, they would have a chance to discuss that with Judith and offer any documentation or proof of their value in advance of the filing of the tentative roll and grievance date. And if they're still dissatisfied, it does not preclude them in any way from filing a grievance. So that's kind of the thumbnail of the timeline of what we'll be looking at. And again, if at any point before that disclosure meeting, which hopefully would be mid-February, legally, those notices have to be mailed by March 1st, 60 days before tentative roll. So we always try to do that a little earlier if possible, because there's an awful lot of work that still has to be done with the review meetings and with new construction and whatnot. But again, if at any point the town would like to have an informational meeting as to where the project's at, or just talk about the nature of the process, why it's being done, as a matter of public information for residents, for property owners, we're happy to do that. So that's kind of the sum total of where things are at and why we're at where we are.
I guess one thing that I think residents always are concerned about when they hear, oh, we're doing a revaluation, my taxes are going to go up.
Right.
And so you probably can do a much better job explaining why that's not necessarily the case.
Right. Yeah, it isn't necessarily the case, although over the years, reassessment has gotten a bad rap for doing that. The act of reassessment itself, especially since the town is doing this in-house and without the use of a vendor, does not increase taxes because, you know, the only thing that would add to the town's budget is the cost of doing reassessment. Here again, the town is doing this in-house, it's not hiring a vendor. So is it possible that there might be some redistribution of taxes? Yes. So I think everyone would acknowledge that since the town last reassessed in 2021, there have been some dramatic changes in property value, largely fueled by the pandemic and by people's buying patterns, if you will. Again, at the end of the day, reassessment is about ensuring property tax and assessment equity to the degree possible based on property value. So if there are properties that hypothetically are selling for double what they did back then, because since the town's last reassessment in 2021, the town's assessments have basically stayed the same. They've only changed if there's been new construction, demolition, or if a property owner has been successful in challenging that value. So since they haven't changed, it's certainly possible that the assessments, the static assessments, may no longer be in sync with what properties are selling for. Now, we don't know this number yet, but one of the important things that will come out of that assessment disclosure analysis will be the technical term is what's the average change in level. So what is the average amount that assessments townwide have changed? So I'm going to offer as an example a town that I just finished working with up in Delaware County, which I know is definitely not Shelter Island, but the principle, the process is the same. They last did a reassessment 5 years earlier. Their average change in level was 1.61, which means the average change to an individual property was about 1.61 times. And whatever that number is in Shelter Island, that'll be one of the things that we look to convey, because that'll be a very easy way for people to get a sense of how the reassessment might affect them. So in the case of this town in Delaware County, 1.61 was the average. So the closer your property's change is to the townwide average, the less likely it is that it's going to have a significant effect on your taxes. Again, I also have to say, just in defense of the process, we don't know, nobody would know what the change to town, county, and probably most importantly, school district budgets would be going forward. because the first time those new assessments will be used will be for the town, county, and school tax in December of '25. Even when we do this, let's say, late January of '25, we won't have a clue as to what those changes would be. So we can't predict. That's why we're looking at what the average change in the assessment would be. So if someone's assessment, I'll go back to the town in Delaware. If someone's assessment went up 2.5 times, well, it's probably fair to think that their taxes are going up to some degree because their assessment went up noticeably more than the townwide average. How much more? Couldn't tell you. Again, when we do the process using the town, county, and school tax that's extended in December of '24, we will redistribute that. And that'll give you an idea, but it's not a prediction of what will happen in the future. So everything really boils down to how does your individual property change in value relative to all the other properties? Your property can go up. You know, it's probably fair to say that given that reassessment hasn't occurred since 2021, you know, maybe there are a few properties here and there, but it stands to reason that most all properties will see an increase in value. The question then becomes, how does that increase compare to everyone else's? If it's in line with the average or if it's less, you may be pleasantly surprised. Again, if it's substantially more than the townwide average, well, to some degree, there'll be an increase. I can't really give you a more precise answer than that.
That's good. Thank you.
Well, sure.
Is there anyone in the audience who has any questions for Judith or John? Come on up.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a question for you, but it's just more to make the board aware. When Al Hammond, one of his big pushes for doing them in-house, being at 100%, is we got, and I don't remember the number, and I'm pretty sure it was from the county, not the state. We got, it's not called a grant, but it was almost more like a reward from the county.
Yes, that is
State, and it was like from the state. And I thought it was, maybe some of the other board members, I thought it was about $75,000 a year, which I assume, is that still out there?
The money is still out there. It's up to $5 a parcel in the year of a reappraisal, reassessment, which is what the town is doing. I'll be perfectly honest, I wish it were more than that. The issue we have presently is that the appropriation, the pot of money to divvy out for that purpose, it's limited. So it also depends on how many municipalities are eligible in a given year, which, you know, we won't know for 2025 at this point.
Okay.
There will be some money. In fact, one of the things that Judith and the town will be doing is they will be submitting a new cyclical plan because you have to be in the cyclical program to qualify for the aid.
Okay.
But they will do that, so.
I just want to make sure everybody up there was aware of it, and, you know, we go after it, and if it was still available even, you didn't know. We always want to grab whatever we can.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Sure. Thank you.
It's up to 75,000, you said?
No, it's up to $5 a parcel.
It's $5 a parcel.
Yeah. So I wish it were 75,000, but, yeah, probably like in the $10,000 to $15,000 range.
Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah, and John Cronin, I was a two-term property assessor on Shelter
John,
Island.
if you could come up, John, if you could come up to the podium, please.
I was a two-term property assessor on Shelter Island when we used to maintain values at market value. But to be specific to Peter's point, which is a really valid one, the operation of the assessor's office in the days when Al and I were in there was probably between 1/3 and 1/2 of that cost was borne by New York State because of where we kept values. So Peter's point's a valid one, and if that money is still out there, should be a motivator to do it.
Thank you.
Sure.
The town used to get an annual reward,
Yes,
and if they assessed at 100% value.
yes.
So in the last 2 cycles, that changed,
Right.
and it's going downhill on a
Yes.
regular basis. So that's the part I don't quite
Yeah, so that gets into something I mentioned at the beginning, the equalization rate. Legally, we have to issue these equalization rates every year. And the equalization rate, it's meant to be the state's official determination of what the overall average level of assessment is in the town. Now, when the town was doing a reassessment, that was always 100%. And it's the town's goal to get back to 100% for 2025. So what happened since 2021, so in 22, 23, and 24, the town's assessments didn't change. They stayed the same because the town wasn't reassessing. But market values did change. So where a community doesn't reassess, we do analysis of sales. And we provide that analysis to the town. And the town looks at, the town, of course, is certainly entitled to have its own analysis, its own value. But together we collaborate, if you will, on what's an acceptable level of assessment that we can confirm. Because if we can confirm it, we issue it as the equalization rate. So the key here is in the last 3 years, the town's assessments haven't changed because the town hasn't been able to reassess. So therefore, while the assessments stay the same, the market values go up. So the assessments on average represent a smaller percentage of market value than they did the prior year. That's why you're seeing that level, that number go down the last 3 years.
So let me ask you this.
Sure.
If the town was assessing at 100%, why did they stop? Why did they stop if they were being paid a reward and to help underwrite that cost?
It was really came down to we didn't have enough help in the office.
I said,
Yeah.
and so didn't the town recently get rid of everybody and have just one person?
So the town has abolished the elected board of 3.
Right.
And changed it to the sole appointed, which would be me now.
Yeah.
And I can't do the work of 3 people.
I understand it.
So I still need the assistance in the office.
Right, so was there any reason for eliminating the other 2?
To try to find more employees in the office.
You know what I'm saying is they eliminated.
They eliminated the board of 3 so we could hire more people.
Right, but you already had 2 people.
So there were 2 people, but we need a 3rd person.
Right.
And we were trying to find that 3rd person who didn't necessarily need to be, island resident.
What I would just add is that the town had a 3-person board of elected assessors.
Right.
There still are a few towns that have that. For example, down in Suffolk, if I remember right, Southold has that and Riverhead has that.
Right.
And actually so does East Hampton.
Yes.
But in general, if you look statewide, the number of communities that go with a 3-person elected board has diminished quite a bit. I think the general feeling is that, look, assessing is a difficult job. It's really a professional position. So generally, and obviously this is up to each community, but the trend has definitely been, let's switch from boards of elected officials to a sole appointed assessor who has a 6-year term. So hopefully that person is full-time, and the presumption is that person will bring I'm not saying the boards of assessors didn't bring a professional approach. Don't take it that way, John. But I think that's been the idea why so many communities over the years have switched from 3-person boards to a sole appointed.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. If you only have 1 person working now, and it's 3 people working then, and it wasn't costing you as much because the salaries were limited. Why would you change?
I'll
Just
say
because it was trendy? We have very low taxes here
Yeah.
in general. And so why tamper with something that works?
Look, I can't speak to Shelter Island. I can speak to other communities that, I'll say it this way. I work in a region that covers everything from Delaware, Green, Dutchess, down through the islands. Where we've seen three-person boards change to a sole assessor, it generally had something to do with the availability. And again, I'm offering a general observation. I'm not saying in any respect that this was the case in Shelter Island, because from my limited interaction with Shelter Island over the years, I always thought that the Board of Assessors did a great job of working with each other. I'll say it this way, not all three-person boards necessarily have that good working relationship. And also, I think there was a perception, whether it's real or not, I'm not going to speak to that, but I think some people felt that the act of having to run for office for a job that requires people to set values on other people's property, some people weren't really comfortable with that. They thought it was better to have an appointed position. But again, I think the circumstances might be a little bit different from one community to another.
Just to answer that a little bit, and also for the Zoom audience, that's Alfred Kilb who's been speaking and asking questions, and I didn't ask him to come up because I didn't want to have him have to, use his cane to come up to the podium. So I gave him a break there. But last year, the town board, both when it was time to replace a vacated assessor seat, both the Democratic and Republican Party chairs came to us and said they were having trouble canvassing, finding candidates to run for office. So, and because of the training that's involved, I don't even know how many hours, but it's quite extensive when someone takes office and they have to complete it by a certain amount of time. It didn't seem to make sense to continue to have an elected person coming in that could change every few years with the training that's required and getting up to speed. And so it's also just been a matter of the plan was to keep more people in the office, and we just haven't had that right mix of people yet. But we're continuing to do interviews for assessment aides currently so that we can get a complement of skills in there that we need to run the office and do what we need to do each year. John?
Yeah, the other point I was going to make is in defense of the town, and as a person who was elected into that job many years ago, there's about 8 complicated courses that you have to take. Each one ends in an exam from New York State that you have to pass. So after you get elected into that job, you're suddenly in a position where there's an enormous amount of schooling and essentially certification or licensing that's involved in order to do the job. In the years when some of this happened, it was during the pandemic. And, the assessor's office lost at least 1, if not 2 people in that time period, were individuals who were appropriately certified by the state, trained, and the burden then fell on people who were new to the job. So the outcome was very predictable, but not avoidable. So I think in defense of what the office has tried to do, they're certainly moving in the right direction in terms of looking at reassessing now. But the reason it happened was change in staffing and complicated requirements in order to satisfy the state requirements to do the job.
Are there any other questions from the physical audience? Anybody in the Zoom audience? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming down from Albany.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is discussion about the generic environmental impact statement that would, whether or not it's required, what are steps forward on, that would be for the comprehensive plan. We have invited BFJ Planning to come on, but I don't see them on yet, but I had scheduled them for 2:30, so they will be on shortly. So we'll go ahead and rejigger the order of items. So the next discussion would be the letter to center residents on the water quality test results in the center. I just need to step out to make a call, so if you would lead the discussion on this, yes. I'll be back as soon as I can.
Okay. So everybody up here has a copy of the letter that went out. Jen, I think this has your notes included in it?
I'm
Oh, so you handed them out.
gonna borrow Embers?
Yeah. She might have two there.
Oh,
It looks like it's
yeah,
stuck.
no, this is something else. We can share. Is Joe, oh, Joe's on the phone.
He's right there.
Oh.
It's like a ninja. It's not right.
So,
Well, we'll just go through, I'm just wondering if my comments were fully incorporated or partially incorporated.
Yeah, the version that's before you is your latest copy. So no changes have been made subsequent to your edits. Yeah.
Great. Sneaking around.
okay, so some of the changes you made, Ben,
Yes.
were that you added, you broke out the 8 wells with high nitrates from the 11 wells with bacteria,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And then down in the paragraph at the bottom, according to the United States EPA, bacteria is a cause for concern whenever it's found in drinking water. That's directly from the EPA's website, so that's been confirmed.
Mhm.
The next point, with respect to nitrates, drinking water should not have more than 10 milligrams per liter of nitrates because higher concentrations pose health risks for babies less than 6 months. That's also on the EPA website. So I think we can get rid of the,
Confirmed.
yeah, the brackets. So the next comment you had was that on the top of page 2, the testing area is shown on the enclosed map. You have a note that it should be a general map of the testing area without pie charts. I found the pie charts helpful for getting a snapshot, but if you want like to break down the pie charts, so it shows the high nitrates, high bacteria, and then like how did you want to see that? Or why
Well, my vision
don't
of
you
the
want the pie
was
charts?
You can kind of draw those boundaries any way you want, and you can redraw them so some areas have nothing and some areas have more. It was just subjective. And the data in this table sort of tells the story and it kind of can stand on its own.
In this table? This
And-
table doesn't
oh, okay.
tell you about areas. Ben, borrow yours.
I know I have a letter someplace.
Okay, so you kind of can't redraw the lines for the map. The way we did the testing, it's done area by area. Like the reports, the data was reported area by area. And it was organized that way because that's the direction of the groundwater flow. And so it was done based on the different watersheds so that the water in that area should be similar in nature and traveling in the same direction. So if you were to redraw the zones, then you could have a zone that has the watershed going right in the middle. So people on this side of the line and people on this side of the line are gonna have very different experiences because water's traveling away, going in different directions. So when it was designed with that in mind, that those people should have similar properties to their, what's happening in the area.
Okay. Like I said, it seemed like a slightly subjective look at the data when you can just give them the data. The purpose is to put people on notice that there's a problem and go get your water tested. So I'm not sure what the pie charts and the map adds to any of that. It actually adds more confusion than it does explanation.
Let me add, Ben, I think that cuts both ways with the map because there are some neighborhoods that demonstrate very low levels of nitrogen. I think that's helpful for people to recognize that perhaps their water neighborhood is not so at risk where there are other zones that are clearly elevated. One particular takeaway of the study that I think is most helpful to the town is understanding where those concentrations are. That helps us prioritize resources for corrective action. Also helps us prioritize attention to the residents. You know, if we were to look at our WQI program for septic rebates, you know, that's where we would want to encourage folks to take action the most. On the flip side, there are other zones that are, you know, have demonstrated they are lower. That might be a lower priority for allocating resources. Meg's point about the zone boundaries, there's certainly a layer of subjectivity to the lot by lot. You know, you could easily argue that, you know, you go across the street and that could be in a given zone versus the other side. But the basis is that those particular zones represent a given groundwater neighborhood where folks are sharing groundwater in terms of direction that it travels. And we would expect to see similar results within that neighborhood.
But we don't always see similar results. And unless you want to explain to everyone in this letter what the ground flow analysis is, I'm not sure how this helps.
It's not so much as of an analysis as a grouping, and that's very relevant. You know, part of what we need to know is where are the problem areas, and that's what these zones help demonstrate.
For us and internally, and maybe further down the line, but for the purpose of this letter, which is to let people know that here's what we found. We did some testing. Here's what we found. Go get your well tested. Because we only tested 100 and how many? 169 out of 400.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to get the other 300 people to go out and test their well, 350 people. So by telling them that in zone A, everything's fine according to this pie chart, the people in zone A who haven't gotten their wells tested, why would they go get their wells tested?
I would just say respectfully, I don't think anything from the map is saying your water is fine or it's not fine. I think it's just conveying another layer of information for folks to make the most appropriate decision for them. I agree with you. The primary takeaway is to draw attention and encourage folks to look into their situation individually. But I think removing the map is perhaps.
I said leave the map, just take out the pie chart stuff. And show people that the area of the wells that were tested, so they know they can look on the map and see their street. But if they find their street in their quadrant and everything is, you know, fairly okay according to the wells that we tested, it's going to discourage them from going to test their wells, and that's not what we want.
So your recommendation is we simplify the data per zone, like give the average test in their neighborhood?
Just as far as the map is concerned.
Well, the zone is irrelevant if we don't include any of the test result data, right? I mean, if it just, you know, what's the point of saying you live in zone 7 if there's no zone?
I'm saying get rid of the zone, just make sure everybody can see the boundaries of the wells that we tested so they can see if they're in there. And encourage them to go get their wells tested. I'm not sure what it adds to information to be given to the public by, I don't see the upside. I only see downside to having zones and boundaries.
I think actually I'm a little confused as to what you would like to see on the map. You like the
map?
You like the zone designation, but you don't like the zones at all.
No.
So what is it that you want to see on the map then specifically?
Just to make sure the people in the center know the boundaries of where we tested wells.
The boundaries of the center triangle.
Yes.
I see. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
You just want to see the triangle.
I think that's helpful, so people can see if they're in there and then go get their wells tested. But to show them that they're in a quadrant which may not show any problem isn't helpful, because why are they gonna go get their wells tested when we know that their test results could be different than their next door neighbors?
So, so this would simply say then you were in the testing zone, and that this triangle, you live within this triangle,
Yeah.
and here is the results of the test we took
Yeah.
within the triangle.
And if you haven't gotten your well tested, go get it tested.
Go get it tested. All right.
Then we can later, once we have more data, we can build a more.
Well, to be fair, the triangle was set up from data in the first place. I mean, that's the reason. And so it's a slippery path, I suppose, to say, if we break it down further, it's subjective, because arguably this center triangle is a best judgment for where historically these nitrate issues existed in the first place. No, that's not a taxing boundary or a survey boundary. That's previous analysis work that's established a triangle in the first place. So we're just adding another layer of detail to this based off of groundwater flow.
Well, do you agree that the purpose of this letter is to let people know we did some testing, that we found some problems?
Yeah.
We really want them to go get their wells tested. Isn't that the purpose of this letter?
I think that's a simplification of at base, that's what we wanted to do, right? There was a call from the community to do this testing for public health reasons, and we did it, and we've distributed the results to them. I guess I would then insist that perhaps the zoning and that further analysis, maybe that takes place at we've indicated there would be a follow-up information session for people who wanted to come. Is that the kind of forum where you think that discussion is appropriate?
That would be better for them than this letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not an opposition then to those
No.
discussions. It's
Not at all.
It's to simplify the communication here.
Just give people the raw information and data and encourage them to go get their well tested, so we can have more data ourselves, so we can get more information.
So then there would be some other changes to this letter, because there's other references to.
Okay, yeah.
But you understand that when homeowners go and test their wells independently, we don't get that data.
Yeah, I know, but
So
please.
it's not we're not sending this out to create more data points for ourselves. It's to educate the public on what we found based on the voluntary participation of community members. So it's not just to say, hey, here's a note with some maybe potentially scary information for some people, but we're not going to tell you where. I do think we need the map. I think that we should have the areas marked out where we tested. And even if it's just to give an average for each area, so people are kind of aware of what the potential is in their zone, I think that's appropriate. The people who volunteered to participate did that with an understanding that they were going to get some of this information back, so that they would have some idea of what's going on in their general area. So I don't think, oh, good, you found it.
Yeah, that's, this
Yeah,
one that's up here now,
Can I screen
this
share?
is less problematic than that one. But also, Meg, you just brought up another edit that I missed, which is we're encouraging people to go get their wells tested, but we also need to encourage them to share the results with us.
Mhm.
So we should add that too, Jeff.
So this is.
Like the map that was up before this one seemed less problematic than this one.
What's problematic about this map? I'm confused. I don't understand why.
Yeah, I like it because it does say how many wells were tested in each zone. I also disagree with you when you said, like, we only tested 150 wells.
169.
Out of, like, well, I'm rounding. 150 out of 450. I think statistically, that's a very valid sample. Like,
Statistically, it is, but we're
statistical
talking
world.
about wells that might have nitrates in them. I mean, you want to get as many as you can.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely, definitely, but I think we have a statistically valid sample here to, on which to guide us, to some extent.
What I think is most helpful about the zoning, and not to be argumentative, is I think it's helpful to draw attention by allocating the results to a particular zone. If that's a zone, and these are fairly broad, I mean, let's keep in mind that these are not, 5 parcel zones. They're quite large. There are clear patterns here where there are elevated areas that I don't think come as a surprise to most people. But that's really helpful information for those communities. They tend to be the more concentrated in terms of density. They tend to be older in terms of development. And I think that's an important message to get out to folks that live in those areas. Not to say that you individually have a problem, because I think we've made it very clear results can vary, property by property. But to show that a given neighborhood is showing higher concentration levels is a major value add to this test. Likewise, there are patterns here where there's clearly lower concentration levels, and that information can be helpful to neighbors who are perhaps concerned and want to know what's going on more in their community. I mean, that's my perspective. Obviously there's the board's take on this. But I would just caution in reducing the amount of data we're sharing, because the community paid for this and it's helpful. This isn't, they're not offering any advice here in terms of town policy. We've made it very clear that folks should get tests on their own to follow up if they weren't in the program. We've made it very clear where folks can find information about how to treat this on their own, and that the town is looking at a variety of next steps with certainly no commitments. So I think this is a very nice, neutral response. And quite frankly, Ben, I think your comments were very appropriate. I think we've landed on something that's really helpful.
No, I agree. I'm a full support of the letter. I think you did good work to get this thing done and organized. I appreciate that. I thank you for that. The other thing that this pie chart thing, it makes me dizzy when I look at it. The problem I'm having with it is it's hard to track. Like in this first paragraph, it says 8 wells should be red or whatever. Or it's hard to translate that into that pie chart. That's why the map that Christina had up the first time was just the raw data on the
No, it wasn't. No,
It didn't have
there's
raw
no
data.
data on
I
that.
see that one again. Oh, yeah. It's just the number of the segments.
Right.
But
Yes.
they're color coded.
I mean, if the pie chart's confusing, we could just put the raw data in each area, say here was the
I'd be
high,
okay
here
with
was the
that.
low, here was the
I'd be more okay
average.
with that.
Okay,
Our original
I think that was the
presentation was high, low,
right.
and average for the whole subzone. And
I can say in subzone
actually,
A, there was 1 well that was above 10, 3 that were between 5 and 10.
so just in general, I think it's more appropriate and much more helpful to talk about number of wells in those categories, over 10, 5 to 10,
Yeah.
under 5. We had originally looked at this with just taking averages. But the average I thought was inaccurate because we have a few outliers on the high side, and they would change the average in the whole zone. So it's much more helpful to talk about number of wells, and then we landed on
I'm
pie
okay with
chart.
that. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so it sounds like redistribution of that same data out of pie chart format into counts.
We're in.
Okay. So in a given zone, it'll say how many wells over
Yeah.
10,
How
5
many
to
wells
10,
between 5 and 10, how many below 5,
and even
how many
total,
bacteria.
and even total tests in the zone.
That's
we can-
totally fine.
Yeah.
That's good.
I like that.
Yeah, it's as cut and dry as it could be. There's no,
Right.
No interpretation, just here's what happens.
yeah. we could try and fit that on the map, but I'm starting to think that might be
A little
text. We may have to put a table, where the map will just say your zone,
That's fine.
and then you refer to the table for your zone, and you can get the breakdown. Yeah. Any other comments on the text?
I haven't compared this to what I sent you, but you tell me it's all in here.
Yeah, same thing.
I'm fine.
Yeah, same thing. Yep. Yep.
I like the links to the website. It's good. I think this is a good letter to send out to our residents in the center where they can take it upon themselves to act.
Right.
Oh, one thing we need to add is a request that if they do act and get their wells tested,
Yeah.
it would be wonderful if they sent us a copy of the test.
Feel free to share.
Cool.
A little
Yeah.
related, there are a couple of members in the community that told me that they never got results, their water test results. They participated and never got them
I
from.
forgot the results.
They
Okay.
should have been emailed, so check your spam. So maybe it went to your junk mail if you didn't already have them as a friend. So check your junk mail for an email from either Mermaid or Goldman.
And those, I would say if those folks want to reach out to me, I can tell them, oh no, I can't.
Can't, but we can let Greg know and he could send out an email to them.
Yeah, yes, sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they could send me an email or call and leave me a message and I could connect them with, or they could contact the testing agency directly. Yeah, that'd probably honestly be the best course of action. Yeah.
Yeah, so, WAC was anxious for us to send this out as soon as possible, so I guess we'll just take one last look at the chart before it goes, the chart and map before it goes out. So, if you can just email it to us.
Yeah. Okay. So the letter will come from the board. Is that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Shouldn't things emanate from the board rather than a committee?
Yes, yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the procedure, right?
Town board or me as supervisor.
Yeah. That's what I was asking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Town board's good.
All right. Very good. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
thank you, Joe. Good job, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Good letter.
It is 2:25, I still do not see the BFJ planning on here yet. Okay, so something that should not take too long
The 8th hearing.
is, DA Attorney Einwell got, great questions. Chief Reed is also on. And I actually spoke to him this morning and he answered my question, Stephen, about the local data that you had gotten that from.
Yes.
From Chief, so that was good. So the district attorney is lobbying New York State to change the law relating to the opioid epidemic. And so if you look through the resolution we're going to have a special meeting on, it's just talking about, just get to the meat of it, holding drug dealers culpable for manslaughter or aggravated manslaughter for deaths caused by overdoses, affording judges the discretion in imposing bail for those who possess or sell fentanyl amounts less than 8 ounces. That's the current threshold. It has to be above that right now for them to impose bail. Making, don't even want to try and say it, Frank, his trade name, an animal tranquilizer, a controlled substance, and making overdose victim families eligible for victim compensation. And originally, when I was talking to someone from the district attorney's office, I thought we'd be able to put this resolution on, a letter of support. They're getting them from all of this, all 10 towns in Suffolk County.
Yeah, they have 9 of 10 already.
So we're the last one. And I thought we had until April 5th or something, I think is when the DA is going up to Albany, but he's doing a press conference tomorrow and wants to be able to say that he has the support of all 10 towns pushing this forward. We have our own opioid grant that we have been, we worked on to get to try and, help contribute to, fighting the problem. So I felt like this was an easy one to support because we really do want to make a difference.
Very easy. Yeah, good move, Amber.
Good question. What's been our experience in Children? This situation?
Well, we have stats that were incorporated into this, but if the chief is listening, I know he sometimes steps away. I don't know if he's there, but we have had community members die of drug overdoses over the past, I think, 5 years was the data that you received from him.
Yeah, it's the last 5 years.
Yeah.
We had
I have it.
10 fatalities and Narcan was deployed 15 times.
Yes.
15 times.
Well, I could list off some data that I got from the police department. So, in 2018, there were 2 non-fatal overdoses, 1 fatal. 19, 2 non-fatal, and no fatal. 2025, non-fatal, 0 fatal. 2021, 1 non-fatal, 3 fatal. 2022, 6 non-fatal, 0 fatal. And 2023, 6 non-fatal and 0 fatal. And that just goes in line with the increased ability of our officers to administer and first responders to administer Narcan. So as you can see, the amount of times they have to use Narcan or they were taken to the hospital in a timely manner, still a lot of instances of overdosing on the island.
And the officer that we have sent to work with the East End Task Force has been very helpful in the work that has been going on. And I know a little bit, but I don't want to say too much. So if Chief were on, I'd let him speak to it because he would know how much could or should be disclosed, but it's been good. So when we conclude with the regular part of our meeting, we will then call for a special meeting so that we can do that. It's not very fast, this resolution. I did see Noah
Noah's on.
Levine. Okay, so
Yeah.
Noah's on, and then Noah, if you want to. Oh, good. Are we
Hello,
waiting-
thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, Noah. Are we waiting for anyone else from your office to join?
Yeah, Frank Fish is joining in. Not sure if I know he's at his computer. When you see his name pop up, if you could let him share his video as well, that would be great.
Okay. The reason for this topic is, I know there's been discussion in the community of what kind of environmental impact study or statement needs to be done in connection with the comprehensive plan. So we thought that we would start off with the consultants just giving us a little bit of background about, what used to be required versus what's currently required, and just helping further our understanding of what's needed and what our options are to go forward. And I wanted to put it on now in March, because if we want to try and make this happen, the timeline needs to start now, depending on what path we go down.
Got it.
So I'll turn it over to either Noah or Frank.
Frank
who-
is on. You just logged in.
Yes.
Okay. Frank, you're not. Frank is not. His video is not on yet, just yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
But while we're waiting for him to join the meeting, if it's okay, can I share my screen? We prepared a couple of slides, which I think will help just walk you through the process. There's just 8 slides. It's not too long, just some basics, and I'm sure we can spend time on any one of them. But let's see, am I able to share?
You should
Yes,
be.
Christina's
Okay,
giving us.
great. Terrific. One sec. And, just to reiterate, for those of you who don't know, my name is Noah Levine from BFJ Planning. We are the firm that has been assisting the town with the comprehensive plan update for maybe since last March, I would say. And then I'm joined by Frank Fish, principal at BFJ Planning. He is.
No, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can.
Yeah,
Great, thank you,
I'm on.
Frank.
I'm on.
So I'll let you introduce yourself, Frank.
Yeah, no, I'm Frank Fish, and I was involved in the very, very beginning of this process. In fact, there are a few questions on seeker on it. So as we get through this, I can be available to get into those a little bit.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so just very, very quickly, just some brief overarching ideas about the seeker process. What is it? Essentially, the seeker helps to understand the impacts and the environmental factors in planning and decision making from the proposed actions that are being considered by the town. And it's part of the decision making process to help identify those impacts. It's not so the process itself is to help identify and evaluate those impacts. It's not a direct decision making process in and of itself. And it does require all agencies to evaluate the environmental consequences of proposed actions and to consider alternatives. So when is an environmental impact statement, when is that required? Typically, an EIS is required for projects or actions that are likely to have significant adverse environmental impacts. So some examples of that could be, substantial adverse changes in existing air quality, ground or surface water quality, or impacts with traffic or noise levels, substantial increases in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems, growth inducement, or other creations of hazards to human health. There are a lot of different things that could trigger this, but these are just some examples. As lead agency, which is the town board, as you are the only agency really that would adopt a comprehensive plan and then subsequent zoning actions, you are required to take a hard look at the relevant environmental impacts. So that means a meaningful review and consideration. And then after taking a hard look, you must make a reasoned decision or a reasoned elaboration on how you came to your conclusion. And there are several different alternatives in the seeker process that you can go under, and I might ask Frank to elaborate on these a little bit. But the first is an EAF with attachments. So that would basically be an EAF with additional information to help evaluate things that you think might need further attention. An EAF with changes in the draft plan to modify any significant negative impacts, and then a generic environmental impact statement. But maybe I'll just pass it to Frank just to kind of add to that, if you have anything to add, Frank.
Yeah, I think what you have before you is a choice under seeker. The first step in seeker, which Noel will cover later, is just for you to become lead agency. You are the lead agency. That's usually done on, what's called an EAF Part 1. And then once you are lead agency, then you need to do an EAF. Seeker says the next step is an EAF, what's called Part 2. And the Part 2 is just a form. It's about 10 or 15 pages long that DEC publishes. And the EAF asks you as the lead agency to go through a set of about 12, well, there's more of them, 12 or 15 different impacts, and rate those impacts. Are they small impacts? Actually, there may not be an impact at all. They may be beneficial. Or are they a small impact, or are they a large impact? If something's a large impact on the EAF, you're asked to then determine, is it significant and adverse? Those are the two words. In other words, you don't have to do an EIS unless you find that the action you're about to take, in this case, a comprehensive plan, has a significant adverse impact. And that's what the EAF Part 2 is about. And if you find that of all the categories, some of which Noah mentioned, for instance, on groundwater, on traffic, on schools, if those things might have a small impact, or they might even have a beneficial impact, the question is, you then check those off, no impact or small impact. But if you check off a major impact, that is on the EAF, then you have to evaluate it. Is it significant, and is it adverse? Those are the two words, significant, adverse. If it's not, if you don't find any, then you are in a position to make what's called a negative declaration, and that is no, there's no significant adverse impacts, and that is the end of seeker. Now, we have that's one option. I'm not saying we're recommending anything here, but in some other communities that we've worked in recently, the town board has said to itself, well, actually, we wouldn't be adopting this master plan if it had any significant adverse impacts. So they made a finding that it didn't have any, and they did a neg deck. But there's a second option, and that is that we've run into cases where we'll do an EAF. There are some large impacts, and you need to evaluate them. And so you might have an EAF that could affect the draft plan. And that is, if you made a change in the plan, it might modify or, eliminate any significant adverse impact. And you are allowed to do that. In fact, there's a specific court case that allows you to do that. And then you can still do a negative declaration. And by the way, I should go back on the first option there, which I forgot to mention. The EAF, you may need on suppose you check off a large impact, but you want to know more about it. And that's the EAF with attachments. In other words, we've just done an EAF in another municipality with attachments to it. And in fact, in Southampton Village, where the village made a negative declaration, they did want a little more information on things. So where you want some more information, you can attach that information to the environmental assessment form. So both of these options 1 and 2, the EAF with any attachments you may desire, or the EAF with actually changes in the draft plan to modify any significant impacts, they both end up with a negative declaration. The third option is the generic oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, before you go on, Frank, I'm just trying to understand a little bit better number 2. So with changes in the draft plan, so it would be an EAF that recommends making changes to what we have as our draft plan before going forward?
Well, it's not so much that the EAF might recommend it. It's when the EAF identifies something that could be a large impact, and you say to yourself on examining it, maybe on this one, we modify the recommendation in the plan to avoid that impact becoming a significant negative impact. And there's a court case out there in which the judge says, that's good, that's good. You are looking at things. You're taking a hard look. And if you found the possibility of a significant negative impact and you've changed the plan to avoid that, that's perfectly permissible. And then you can proceed, you change the plan, and you make a negative declaration on that basis. And then, that's perfectly acceptable. So these two options of the EAF with any attachments or the EAF where you modify the plan could both lead to a negative declaration. Now you'll hear at a public hearing almost inevitably, and I was reading over, what NOAA showed me from the county's advice. It's just advice. It's not the county did not give you a formal 239M review because the plan's not complete yet. But you'll find people will get up at a hearing and say, oh, well, doing a master plan is what's called a type 1 action. Seeker has in it actions that are known as type 1 action. A type 1 action is one that is more likely to require an EIS. It doesn't require one, but it's more likely to. A type 2 action is one that is exempt from seeker, doesn't require anything. And that's like a legislative act. And then, basically a third type of action is called just unlisted, an unlisted action. It's neither type 1 or type 2. And in the seeker parlance, they just call it unlisted. You'll find people get up and say, oh, adoption of a comprehensive plan is a type 1 action, and therefore you should do an EIS. That's wrong. That's actually not correct. It's not true. A type 1 action just means you have an action before you that is more likely than an unlisted action to require an EIS. It doesn't by itself require an EIS. And the county's been clear on that. The county says that. And the county says to you, what you should do first is an EAF. And you make, and in fact, seeker requires you to do an EAF to make the decision as to, and it's as simple and as complicated as seeker can be. It comes down to these two words, significant and adverse. Are there any significant adverse negative impacts from adopting your plan? If you find that there are not, there's no reason to do an EIS, even though it might be a type 1 action. There's no reason to do an EIS. However, if you do find that there is a significant adverse impact, then you are faced with, an EIS on which you would then do what's called a positive declaration on the basis of the EAF. Positive, that is, you have to do a full, generic EIS. So those are, I find, sort of the three options in seeker. And we have done it both ways. In the village of Southampton, for instance, we did a negative declaration, or I should say the trustees of the village did a negative declaration based on a Part 2 EAF, and that we prepared for them. And that was the end of seeker for them. NOAA right now is working, though, in the larger town of Riverhead, which does have some significant issues and zoning changes that the town's making, including TDR. So there are some issues there, and we're doing, in that case, a generic environmental impact statement. So there's two ways of doing this, and it depends on, on what you find on the basis of the environmental assessment form.
Frank, can I add one thing to that?
No, go ahead, Don. Yeah.
I think it's important to stress that the generic environmental impact statement would look at the increments between what's being proposed and what is existing. So if you were to think about existing zoning, if that were to be built out, let's just say for the next 10 years, how is that different from what's being proposed? And that's what you would look at. You wouldn't look at just everything as a whole. You're looking at the specific proposed action, which is the adoption of the plan. But if there were something that if there was something specific that had to change, you would be looking at how that change is different from the kind of future without doing that action. You're not looking. Yep. Yes, please.
I just wanted to give them an example now of what we're facing now, which is in a lot of different places in Long Island. And that is, let's take a sea level rise. Does someone could get up and say, well, sea level rise, we have to look at a generic environmental impact statement to take that into account. That's not the question, actually. As Noah said, the question is, does your adoption of the master plan have a significant adverse impact on sea level rise? Most communities would say no. You can't control sea level rise. And are you doing something in the plan that makes it worse? Now, if you are, then that's a different question. But if you're not, then that is not an issue. So the issue, as Noah said, is what is the impact of your adoption of the plan? And many times communities have taken it to the extent that if you are not proposing, and we have a couple of communities that now in Riverhead, I gave you the example of a community that is proposing zoning at the same time as the plan. But we have another community in Glen Cove, which we're working on now. They're not proposing zoning as part of the plan. So many communities say, well, if we're not proposing zoning, but we are proposing a long-term plan that just sets the stage for some future zoning, which is not, it could be speculative. We don't know what the future town board would do. Then that requires its own separate seeker analysis at the time the town decides to do that, and if they decide to do it. What's nice, it's a fine distinction, I realize, but there's another court case out there that says, zoning ought to be based on a well-reasoned plan. So many plans will say, hey, the following zoning issues are good ideas. They're good ideas, but they would be an implementation to the plan after you adopt the plan. And then when you do them, if you do them, then you have to do a site-specific, seeker analysis.
Yeah, it's presumed that additional study would go into some of the zoning recommendations that are made in the plan. There aren't many of them, but for some of those recommendations, additional study would need to be required, and it is a little bit speculative from this point to know exactly what those changes would be, because no specific zoning has been proposed. There are a lot of ideas that are put forth in the comprehensive plan. So we thought it might be a good idea just to go through the time frame of what would be in an EAF versus a GEIS document. So can I move on to that? Is that okay?
Before you do, I just want to make sure I have something clear in my head. Before you would do an EIS, a generic environmental impact statement, the precursor to that would be doing an EAF. So you'd start by doing the EAF part 1, and then you do the EAF part 2, which is the longer form where you're analyzing some questions that you have, things you find. And then if that EAF results in a positive declaration, meaning that you have found something that could be both significant and adverse, then you would go and do a generic environmental impact statement, right? Is
That's
that the
correct.
correct order?
Yes,
Okay.
that's it, and that's the sequence. Yes.
If you knew right from the get-go that you were going to have to do a GEIS, you could move through that process fairly quickly, because everything in the GEIS is going to be, everything in the EAF would be covered in a GEIS. But if you're not sure, then yes, that is the process.
Thanks.
Quick question. Say you get to level 2 here, an EAF with changes, draft plan. For those issues that are flagged, could you do an environmental impact statement for just those issues?
No. Oh,
Well,
yeah, kind of.
Yes. This is not easy, but we're going to get to scoping in this. What happens there? I can give you an example of this, which we were just going over with our staff. We had a staff lunch today. In Glen Cove, we are doing a generic EIS, which has 2 major issues: groundwater and transportation. So that is what the EIS will focus on, and it's called doing a quantitative analysis. And then there were several other areas in this the EAF part 2 that were just checked off as small. Now you don't have to include them. In Glen Cove's case, they wanted us to just qualitatively describe them and why they were not significant issues. So yes, you could do an EIS, and that's what's scoping. And do you want to go to that? We have a slide on scoping.
It's the next slide, yeah.
Yeah. Scoping, the definition of scoping, and I should get it out here. Scoping simply outlines, it's an outline of the EIS. And what Seeker actually says on scoping is you are to put in an analysis of the significant adverse impacts, and you also are to identify those impacts that are those categories of impacts that you are not studying. In other words, scoping wants you to eliminate things that are irrelevant. That's not easy to do sometimes, but that's what scoping says. And that's the heart of scoping. So it's not supposed to, scoping is supposed to outline and limit the content of a GEIS so that it's a meaningful GEIS, and it addresses those things that you feel are problems, rather than addressing the world in an encyclopedic. You get one of these 500-page EISs that very few people will read, and that's what scoping hopes to avoid.
That's what I was getting at.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I could add, did you say that Glen Cove had to do an EIS because of a groundwater issue?
Two issues, groundwater and transportation. In
Well-
Glen Cove's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, Frank, I think it's just important to mention that they had to do a GEIS because of a grant that they
Yes,
were
that's right,
awarded.
yeah.
I
Glen- yeah.
I don't know if that, if they would have done it or not regardless, but that was a requirement for their grant.
Right, that was.
I don't know if anything applies more to Shelter Island than our groundwater situation to warrant a GEIS, frankly.
Well, it
Yeah,
depends on whether or not we're impacted.
Yeah, I think the question is, it's sort of like sea level rise. The question is, the adoption of the master plan is the proposed action under seeker. Does the adoption of the plan have a significant adverse impact on groundwater? It might. It might, because there might be something in the plan that is affecting that. But that's the question. Not that groundwater is already, as Noah was saying earlier, you may have an existing condition that already exists. Groundwater is a problem. The question is, you don't have to do an EIS because groundwater is a problem. You would only have to do an EIS if you find that the adoption of the master plan exacerbates the problem in a way that is significant and adverse. That's the question. That's really the...
We're bifurcating, so the adoption of the plan versus implementation of the plan. Am I reading that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it would just be adoption of the plan. From my understanding, no zoning changes are being contemplated at this time. You could look at those zoning changes at a later point and do EIS at that point when you decide to do, to implement those actions. It's really the adoption of the plan at this point, which is the proposed action.
Could you use a GEIS proactively? Just again, because if you're saying that, you can bypass it now, but if you adopt zoning, you may, based on the specific zoning that you adopt, you might have to do an EIS at that point. Can you do the GEIS now and basically piggyback off of it when you adopt the zoning?
Yeah.
And then I also read places that you can charge back developers for the price of the GEIS.
Yes, by the way, that's in seeker too. And you'll find that used, Noah and I were discussing this morning. It's used in upstate New York heavily that way. In other words, you'll find parts of upstate, as you probably know, upstate is not a growth area of New York State. It's losing population. Many places what we work in upstate, they use a GEIS in a way that they set, it's called Chapter 6 of the EIS, in a way where they'll set criteria by which, if you don't exceed them at a later date, you don't have to do anything that's cumulative or area wide. Let me give you an example. You do a GEIS and it includes an examination of the transportation system. We did this in Dutchess County in a town called East Fishkill. IBM was coming in, and now IBM's long gone, so this is historical, but you can do an EIS that looks at those area-wide issues and then says, okay, we looked at traffic. There's not an issue because we're doing the following improvements to the highway system. And we looked at schools, and schools have capacity. So then the EIS can set a threshold. If you don't exceed this particular threshold in terms of square footage of build out, you don't have to look at those two issues. You still, though, have to. A GIS does not excuse you, the developer, from looking at your own site-specific issues, because an EIS never knows where, let's say, a sensitive hazmat issue might exist on a site. So you still have to do some work in the future, but in upstate where they want growth, they sometimes will use a generic EIS on a comprehensive plan to say, oh, we can take this much growth before anybody has to do anything further on schools, and it's usually schools and transportation. Now, I realize in Long Island, there's the additional issue, of groundwater. So there's a yes to your comment, I think.
Okay, good.
And then
I think I like where Stephen was going with this. Because the last draft of the comprehensive plan that I read, it contemplates greater growth. It contemplates centralized wastewater treatment system. It contemplates public water. These are all things that are going to affect the environment, have an impact. And on a mythical island surrounded by water and wetlands with a fragile aquifer, wouldn't you want to do an environmental impact study to see what the lay of the land is, especially if the comprehensive plan that you're looking at is going to contemplate greater growth?
So all of those actions that you mentioned would require seeker review. And it would be difficult for the comprehensive plan to evaluate those actions because it's entirely speculative in nature. There would be no way to know, where a sewage treatment plant is being proposed, where, what type of growth. I think the plan contemplates studying future areas to be proposed, but there's nothing to kind of sink your teeth into there. It really would need to be studied at a later point once those actions are proposed.
That doesn't make any sense to me because there is no specific site, but you want to take a look at your whole environment if you're going to be suggesting that the town code be amended at a later date to incorporate these things. And rather than just ignore it right now because you don't have an address for it.
Well, I think what the comprehensive plan does is it does set the stage in a lot of ways. It does talk about a build-out analysis. It talks about, the existing land uses, where available land is. That is included within the comprehensive plan. But remember, the seeker process just looks at the cumulative impact. So if nothing is being specifically proposed, no sewage treatment plan is being proposed, it's unclear what you would actually be evaluating. At this point, there would be no increment, there would be no change.
Yeah, there's also, by the way, and I hate to, the seeker, I think, on one way, as I said, is very simple in what requires an EIS, but then there's a lot of complexities to it. One of them, another court case, does say seeker is not required to speculate. So if you do not have any concrete plans for a sewage treatment plant, and by the way, I'm not saying you do or don't, but if you do not have anything, then you don't have to speculate on where it may go or what the impacts of that are until you can actually analyze it. So that's another, some case law out there that I would, by the way, I would defer to your legal counsel on anything dealing with case law, but there's a case out there on where the judges said, and they've consistently said this in seeker, that the town in your case does not have to speculate on future actions.
Well, maybe the question that is, on this mythical island that we're talking about, why wouldn't you do this?
Because there's nothing to analyze. Unless you have an actual plan, there's nothing to analyze. It's well, you're looking at the impact of the comprehensive plan being approved and what kind of impact that has on the island, not necessarily it's really hard to explain to you.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, one way to put it in kind of simple terms, I guess, is we would be happy, to take the work to do environmental impact statement. We may or may not find, an impact. I guess that's part of the process. I suspect, based on having prepared the plan, there's not a whole lot that is being recommended that would generate an adverse impact, but that is really up to the town board to decide once we do the EAF. But there is a long time frame involved, and could be a fairly substantial cost, and that is part of your decision making process of whether it's worth the time and money and effort on your parts to do this. We would certainly be happy to do it. And it's really a decision on your end. You could do it. You don't necessarily need to have identified an adverse impact. You can decide that this is the prudent thing to do, and that is your decision.
Can I, just to look at this further, I went to the Secret Handbook.
Yes, yep.
And I went to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, frequently asked questions for local
Right.
officials. And if you don't mind, I read, bear with me.
Oh,
Does
go right ahead.
SECRA apply to the adoption of a comprehensive plan? Yes. A municipality's adoption of a land use or comprehensive plan, as referred to in it, lists town law, state law, village laws. I'm not going to repeat those. Is not only subject to SECRA, but is classified as a type 1 action in the SECRA regulations. As a result, the adoption of a comprehensive plan is more likely to have a potentially significant adverse impact on the environment, and therefore more likely to require the preparation of an EIS. And it continues. If the municipality chooses to prepare a generic EIS for the comprehensive plan and the generic EIS should be made available for public review as a joint document. Having both documents available at the same time provides for meaningful public review and assessment of the comprehensive plan, along with consideration of the relevant environmental factors. Following public review and hearing, the final comprehensive plan and generic EIS and SECRA findings would be produced, and the lead agency can proceed with implementing the plan. I don't know. I don't think there's any place that warrants an EIS more than Shelter Island, frankly.
Yeah. By the way, this is eventually going to be the town board's decision. I just want to clarify that you'll always hear just what you just quoted from the handbook you've got in the Suffolk County sort of informal advisory to you. But here's the key to it. Although it's a type 1 action, as I said earlier, and although adoption of a comprehensive plan therefore is more likely to require an EIS, it does not require one unless you, the town board, find that there is a significant adverse impact. Those are the exact words of SECRA. It doesn't matter what type of action it is if you don't find that there's a significant adverse impact. I'm not saying, again, taking sides on whether you should do an EIS or not, but it's a common myth that because it's a type 1 action, the adoption of a comprehensive plan, you therefore have to do a generic EIS. That is false. That's not true. And that is not what SECRA actually says. You quoted it exactly correctly, because I kind of have been involved in writing some of this stuff. And so there's a fine line there. Yes, it is a type 1 action under state law, SECRA law, but because it is, doesn't necessarily mean you have to do an EIS. The key to determining that is whether the adoption of the plan creates some significant adverse impact. If it does, then you should do a generic EIS. But if it does not, you're not required to do one. So that's the fine nuance of it, that's all. By the way, what Noah said, though, I do want everyone to understand that the process here, and Noah, do we have the process?
Yeah, so we were going to go
map?
through.
You might want to go through the process map so everybody understands that if, I do want you to understand time and money. And this, by the way, time and money is not, should not bear directly on your decision, but you should be aware of it. An EAF is going to bring you through, the first 2 steps on this.
Yeah, I think it's this slide is probably a little better.
Okay, fine. Here we go. The EAF, probably we find we can do EAFs in, somewhere in the 2 to 3 month timeline. But determining significance, you may determine, hey, I need more information. Depends on whether you need attachments to the EAF, and that could add some additional time. We said 0 to 4 months, but so it could be a process that normally an EAF can be done, and you can determine significance within 6 months, I would say. However, if you do an EIS, if at the end of that decision on the Part 2 EAF, at the end of that decision, you decide, hey, we do need to do an environmental impact statement here, then you're into a real 12 to 18 month process. It is nearly impossible to do an EIS, even if you were right on top of every timeline that Seeker provides in less than 8 months. We usually find it takes about 12 to 18 months. And the cost of the EIS is really partly determined by your scoping. Your scoping, you see item 1 there, the draft scope, then a scoping session, then you revise the scope. And the scope is the outline of the EIS. And it's how many items you believe that need to be included in the EIS. So then you develop the EIS based on that. We're finding that a lot of these EISs, for instance, we're doing one now in Riverhead, which is going to cost more than $100,000, and it's going to take, many of these EISs will take between 12 and 18 months. So you are talking about a significant commitment of resources and time for an EIS. You are still talking about it with an EAF to do it with attachments, to do it so you show a hard look. That could still take, between 2 and let's say 6 months. So that's the difference between the two. It's just
Right,
yeah.
Just another point of clarification, and this just may be me, but the adoption of the comprehensive plan is, you mentioned that being the trigger, but isn't the trigger, if you adopt a comprehensive plan that has an item in it that upon implementation may have a significant impact, isn't that the measure?
Yeah, there's a debate about this in case law versus the need to speculate. You don't know if you do know, I'm sorry, let me give you an example. If you have a comprehensive plan that is calling for a specific zoning change, let's going to say allow another, I don't know, just to pick a number, 100,000 square feet of office buildings, and that's not unusual in some bigger cities. That could be significant, and you have the zoning in place to do that so that you know that upon adoption of the plan, in the next few weeks, we're then going to go to the zoning and adopt it. You then have to analyze that zoning and those impacts. That's right. However,
go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, on the other hand, if you are looking at zoning in a particular place, I can use some examples here, but you're not sure of it as the town board, you need a specific analysis of it. You need additional study. You don't know if you're going to do it for sure. And it's a future step. Then you can say that upon adoption of the plan, any step to implement this, whether it's zoning or a capital budget, is going to require its own site-specific environmental review under Seeker.
That's what I was digging for. So
right.
There can be a carve out.
Yes, and I'll give you an example. We just, and I can, by the way, I can send you and your legal counsel an example of this. We just completed for the town of Yorktown, this was 3 years ago in Yorktown, because I remember the public hearing was during COVID. We completed a complete overlay zone of the downtown Yorktown Heights business district to allow residential within it. The town board decided that, gee, this has impacts. They are significant, but they're not negative. They're beneficial. And therefore, it decided to do a negative declaration. neighbors of downtown Yorktown Heights sued in court, and the judge looked at it. And the town was upheld in this case because, one, their comprehensive plan had anticipated the zoning, and two, as part of the zoning, we did look at, with attachments to the EAF, the impacts that the town board identified in the Part 2 EAF with public discussion, and they included school children and they included traffic. So the judge said they took a hard look, and this was not segmentation. In other words, segmentation, it comes from an old Department of Transportation on highways. This is at the federal level, would build part of an interstate highway, knowing that the system couldn't be complete unless they built an additional segment that they didn't identify or they didn't evaluate. That's segmentation. And you want to avoid what's called impermissible segmentation. So, but in Yorktown, they upheld what we did. And it was all done on the basis of an EAF.
In Riverhead, the town is, I think, fairly comfortable with some of the zoning changes that are being proposed in the plan. And the GEIS is looking at those zoning changes specifically so that when they do decide to adopt zoning, or should they decide to do that, they can refer back to the analysis that was done in the GEIS for the comp plan. If that analysis wasn't done, when they decide to do when they decide to adopt, they would have to do the analysis. It would have to get done at some point in time. This kind of just saves that extra step. But either way, you can't avoid seeker when looking at any kind of zoning change or any kind of discretionary decision for that matter. It will be addressed.
Okay. When would be the right time to start the EAF or GEIS? We are, like, as Noah knows, I don't know, Frank, how close you are to where we are in our process. So right now, our comp plan draft is back with you all, incorporating all the changes from the committee, the CPAC meetings over the past month since October. So it's going to then go back to them to make sure that the changes that they thought were going to be made are made. And then it was going to come to the town board. And so then my plan was to each week to start to look at a chapter at a work session. And so we don't know if the plan draft that you're going to give back to us in the next few weeks is going to be what we as the town board accept, or if we're going to continue to make changes. So would we start the process on this draft, or would we wait until we go through it and make any edits that we make to it? Right, yeah, so it'd be CPAC signs off on it, gives it to us, then we start to look at it. And then any changes that we make, any changes that we want to incorporate, then would we start the EAF.
Frank, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you could start the EAF process when you receive the document. Frank, correct me again. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I would say that's a good point. Wait till you receive it, maybe from CPAC, and take a look at it. However, if you think you're going to, as a town board, add something major that might include by the way, this is almost something I shouldn't say this way, because I'm sure you wouldn't do this. You wouldn't deliberately include something that has a significant adverse impact that's big or negative. But I would say what Noah's just said is probably good. When you receive it and it's complete, then I would take a look and begin. I think it's a good time to begin the EAF because that essentially is a complete document then. Actually, seeker implies, there's a little section of seeker, a lot of towns don't, and I would say seeker I'd be the first to say that, seeker timelines they don't mandate you to do it. There's not a penalty for not doing it. But at the very beginning of the seeker regs, it says when you, the town board, receive an application. So you could interpret CPAC giving you the plan, or the plan being in a position you want it to be, that you begin the seeker process. And the regs say you should try to do that in 20 days. There's no mandate to do it, but it gives you the idea. The seeker writers, was in their mind is yes, when you have a proposal and it's in that shape of proposal, you ought to begin your seeker review, and that's when you could start the EAF, the part 2.
And when a plan is ready, you could submit that to the county for their review, I guess, at that point.
There's one piece missing to all this, which is public input.
That would be after.
After we submit it to the county?
No, after we look at it.
Yeah, we look at it.
Yeah, we look
But
at it.
we
and then-
will have submitted it to the county. If it's a document that we're solid on, we're gonna submit it to the county so the county can sign off on it.
Okay, and they'll give us some additional
Right.
comments.
Correct.
We
And then
take those and incorporate what we want, we should, and then it goes to the public.
But they're suggesting that we start this EAF before we get any comments from the public.
Yeah, because, I mean.
There's no requirement for a public hearing on an EAF.
No, that's
It's not
right.
a requirement for a public hearing, but it's the right thing to do.
What we usually recommend, or I usually recommend anyway, is as you do an EAF, that part 2, to do it once you have, as Noah said, a complete document in front of you, to analyze that. And as you make changes, to keep in mind that you're analyzing a type 2, I'm sorry, not a type 2, a part 2 EAF. We usually suggest not making a determination on the EAF. That is a determination of significance. Is this a pos deck or a neg deck? Pos deck being, we're going to do an EIS. Neg deck, we're not going to do one until after the public hearing. And that way the public gets a chance to speak. I always learn things at a public hearing, I feel, and once in a while, there might be a public comment that affects your determination, how you view a determination of significance. And after that public hearing, you might choose to change that particular item in the plan, or that item is so critically and negative that you do decide to make a pos deck. In other words, what I'm trying to say is begin the type 2 so that you have the type 2, I'm sorry,
Part 2.
you can tell I need a cup of coffee here. Do the EAF part 2. Don't make your determination of significance until after the public gets a chance to speak. That way, you've got all of the public input, and you got the 239. You'll probably have the 239M review from the county. Then make your determination of significance. That is, hey, we heard everything. We've taken a hard look. We don't think there's a significant adverse impact. We make a negative declaration. That ends seeker. You're free to adopt the plan. Or, wow, the county's got concerns. The public has A, B, and C that they've mentioned that really do have to be looked into, you feel. All right, fine. Then you make a determination of significance. That is a positive declaration, and you do the EIS. So now there's nothing in law or regulation that I'm aware of that says you should wait till after the public hearing. In fact, some communities, I've seen them do a determination of significance on an EAF prior to a public hearing. There's nothing in seeker that tells you absolutely when you have to do it. I just find that what you had just said, it's good to get some public input, before you make your final determination of significance.
Thank you for that clarification, because it's really helpful, at least it was to me. And it makes a lot more sense now, what you've been recommending, as far as, moving forward with the county and moving forward with the EAF as soon as the town board gets it, because as long as there's room for us to take in some public opinion and not make the negative or positive declaration until after you feel everyone's been heard, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
Was there anything additional in your presentation that you wanted to finish up before I open this up to questions?
No, just something to think about. Just one little thing, just as far as budgeting and something to think about if you were to get into the GEIS process, because of the unknowns involved in the process. I think you would have to do it in a kind of iterative fashion. Have a scope that takes you to basically the end of the scoping session, not to reuse the word, but basically take you to where this is what we're going to be looking at, and then have a new proposal to do that work, because it's very difficult to give you a sense of the costs and timeframes involved without knowing the work that we or another firm would be tasked to do.
Makes sense.
Are there any more questions from the table? Okay, we'll open it up to the public.
Morning or good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for enduring the meeting that you have, and thank you for listening to me. My name is Bob DeLuca, and I serve as president of Group of the East End. And I have some thoughts to offer on this GEIS business. And since I'm probably going to take a position contrary to that of your consultants, I'll just give you a quick resume. I hold undergraduate and graduate degrees in environmental science and policy. I've taught SECRA for close to 20 years at Long Island University as an assistant professor. I've been a land use practitioner for 38 years, and for about a decade, I served as the county health department's principal respondent on SECRA coordinations and testimony, among other things. So my concern and what I'm hearing from the consultants is, and again, you all are going to have to process all this. The idea that the generic environmental impact statement is one based on you having identified a significant environmental impact is not so, because the premise of doing the study is to evaluate whether a potential impact is going to occur or not. You can't know that ahead of time. So that's an issue. And the reason it relates to comprehensive plans is that you're looking at an array of land use proposals in theory that the town wants to use to proceed for the next 20 years or so of planning, right? So that information aggregated together is supposed to be a reason why you would do the generic environmental impact statement at this stage of the process. And so let's just say you don't do it now and you say, well, listen, in the future, as the county planning commission pointed out, you're going to have to do SECRA on every single zoning proposal that comes in front of you. I would argue it's kind of a waste of time and resources, because if you end up doing an impact statement on every one of those, or people complaining about it to you on every one of those, if you have a generic environmental impact statement that's looked at that, you're much more in the clear if you go forward. The second thing is, if you haven't done SECRA on the comprehensive plan, every time you want to propose a zoning code amendment, you may run into opponents who say, well, is that your policy? Because you didn't look at any of this stuff, because you told us you were going to look at it later. So how is this a policy document that's going to drive land use decisions that you're now telling us we need to pursue? Again, what the generic does is it puts an environmental umbrella over all the different things that you're looking at. And on Shelter Island, like everywhere else on the East End, the environment is a primary planning concern. It allows you to look at those issues at the time when you're considering specific policy recommendations, even if you don't have a specific piece of zoning code in front of you. And the reason that East Hampton, Southampton, Riverhead have all done generic environmental impact statements is because they saw the same thing. And I want to leave you this. So we've talked a little bit about the SECRA handbook, which many of us are familiar with. The Department of State also has a division of local governments, and they produce something called the State Environmental Quality Review Act, frequently asked questions for local officials. And if you take a look at this, what you'll find is there's a little section in here which says, should a GEIS be prepared for all comprehensive plans? And their response, I'm happy to meet with you, is the comprehensive nature of comprehensive plans and the need to inform and gain input from the public on long-range plans makes the comprehensive plan process very compatible with the GEIS. Additionally, the long-form EAF, and you guys are just talking about this, addresses itself more to analyzing projects than planning documents, which is another reason why both the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of State recommend the use of a generic environmental impact statement for comprehensive plan. So I'm not just like making this up. There's a reason why this is done, and it probably should have got started at the very beginning of this process. It didn't happen, whatever. But don't just discount it as, a bunch of expensive paperwork, because that's what the consultant is telling me. Like, these are the same guys that are doing one in Riverhead. I don't see them object, it's, what do you want to do and how do you want to do it? If the comprehensive plan is going to be a series of nice statements about things you hope happen, okay, then it doesn't really direct anything. But if you want the comprehensive plan to have meaning and depth, and you're looking at things like infrastructure, and I urge you to ask your consultants whether the extension of infrastructure, whether it's public water or public sewer, does not have a potentially growth-inducing effect, see what the answer is. Those are the kinds of issues that you can explore. And again, I'm not for or against that, one of those particular things, but what I'm telling you is if you don't look at that, and you just tell people, we want to protect the water, we want to protect the beaches, and we want to do something about zoning that's good for land and affordable housing, that's where you started with this process. Those are all the things that drove the chapters that you developed. You want those chapters to get you somewhere. Where they should get you at the end is a series of specific recommendations that you and the public can evaluate simultaneously, and where possible, if you and look at the Planning Commission's recommendations. If there's specific code that you have come up with, or even generic code that you want to work from, put it in there, take a look at it, let the public have it. It'll take you a little more time on the front end. I'm not saying it won't. But on the back end, the community and you will know what it was the sort of social contract we all agreed to that was going to be in this planning document, because 5-10 years from now, somebody's going to pull it off the shelf. And the more specific it is, and the more there was agreement on it, and the more there was environmental review of it, the more likelihood it has of enduring over time as a planning document for the town. And that's really my goal. My goal is to try to put you in a position where you've got something that you're proud of, that the public understands, and that does drive good planning to the future. Because we all change. I won't be here, you guys may not be here, and somebody else is going to have to do this. And if they don't have a clear guidance and direction, every single one of these zoning proposals is going to be up for debate. And you're going to start all over again. And then do we do an environmental impact statement because we have a transfer of development rights program, or we want to put a micro sewer district someplace? What do we think about that? So I would just urge you to consider, not just me, Department of State, Department of Environmental Conservation. The Planning Commission was pretty clear in that you certainly should look at this proposal carefully under SECRA and follow, the guidance that you get, as well as the fact that if you have specifics, get them into the comprehensive plan. And that's kind of what I would leave you with, I guess. It's concerning to me because I've been at this for a long time and I probably look that way. But, the consultants are supposed to tell you what your best options are. And I don't know how that goes sometimes, but it's hard to argue that doing the SECRA process fully, transparently, and to the best of your ability, and getting the public involved as early as possible is a problem in some way. I've not seen it, and I haven't seen it in the towns that have done generic environmental impact statements with their comprehensive plans. So I thank you very much for your time, and I really do appreciate it. And I'm happy to leave this, if you don't have it.
I mean, Al read from earlier.
This is actually different than that.
Oh, okay. I do have a question for you, though. Who are you here representing?
So I represent about 100 members who live on Shelter Island. Those members have called me with concerns about the comprehensive plan, which I looked into. And I also sort of work generically across the region, as some of you may know, in other environmental issues. So we have a membership base here on Shelter Island since 1986.
As Friends for the East End or whatever?
Group for the East End.
East End?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Happy to answer.
Anyone else? Anyone up?
Good afternoon, Stephen Jacobs. Just a couple of brief comments. First, in order to, I think, understand where the consultants are coming from and, excuse me, where they're going, I think it's helpful to take a look at their contract, which was, excuse me, pardon me, entered into about a year ago. Page 1, the project assumes a negative declaration. Sorry, that's page 4, the first page that actually has text. The last page, thus we do not anticipate that a generic environmental impact statement would be required. And among the deliverables, Negative declaration and associated resolutions. Finally, turning to a seemingly more objective source, there have been some references to the Suffolk County Planning Commission, but I don't believe anyone actually read from the advisory comment that was part of the resolution that was enacted by the commission in December of last year. It quotes the SECRA handbook as follows: while it is possible to issue a negative declaration for the adoption of a comprehensive plan, a generic EIS is the most appropriate way to analyze the impacts of a comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Supervisor,
Okay, go ahead.
may I respond just to that point? Is that permissible?
Sure.
I just wanted to respond. There was, I think this comment has come up about the proposal that our firm gave to the town with regard to preparation of the plan and the language that we used. And I just want to clarify that a little bit. When we say that this proposal assumes that a negative declaration would be made, that doesn't mean that we think that that is the right course of action. It means that we need to make assumptions to prepare a cost proposal as part of our project. And when we say assumes, it means that we are going to go in this kind of this approach that takes us to this, month 12, or let's just say without doing an environmental impact statement. There's no possible way for us to understand how to give a time estimate or a cost estimate for an EIS without knowing where we stand at that point. So we did our best to give the town something to work with that assumes kind of, doing a negative declaration and an EIF. However, should the town require a EIS, that would be covered under a separate scope of work. That is all that language was intended to convey.
Thanks, Laura. Anyone else in the physical audience who want to speak on this? Anyone? Okay, on Zoom, I see Jan Sudal has his hand raised.
He has a thumbs up. I don't know.
Oh,
if
thumbs
that's
up.
the same
Oh,
thing.
but okay, I'll take the thumbs up, but.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Okay, so I just wanted to ask the consultants, BFJ, who's during the presentation, I mean, there was a lot of generalities and kind of difficult to point out anything specific, but it seems like the consultants are struggling with finding anything in the current draft comprehensive plan that would have significant and adverse environmental impact, potential impact. One of the things that the current draft of the CP, before it went to CFJ for revision, was a proposal to roll out public water throughout the island over the next 10 years and mandate everybody to connect to it, okay? And also the plan references the ground and surface water management plan, which calls for the same thing, which this plan was adopted in March 2020 and was never discussed in public or subject to the public review because this was during the height of COVID. So do you guys think that something like pumping of tens of thousands of gallons of water per day, or maybe even hundreds of thousands of gallons of water per day from one place and then distributing it throughout the island and discharging it there in different places of the island could potentially have a significant environmental effect? And same thing with wastewater treatment facility, which is still being mentioned in the plan. I would like to have your comments, and then I'll have follow-up question to that.
Jan, I just want to point out one thing. Comments should always be directed at the town board. If I choose to, open it up to the consultants to respond, but I just want to make that clear. Like, we are the ones that you should be addressing. So it's something that we
very
should
good. So
consider.
perhaps you could comment whether you think pumping hundreds of thousands of gallons of water per day from one place and depositing somewhere else might potentially have significant environmental impact.
Yeah, I'm just going to clarify, that is not in the comp plan. So I would like everyone to read the new draft when it's ready and when it's presented to the board, so you can see what's actually in the document before demanding a specific reaction to it. So the comp plan does not call for public water island-wide. It calls for a study to be done to determine where it might be necessary in the future. So what areas of the island might end up with non-potable water because of saltwater intrusion. So it does call for us to do a study like that down the line, but it doesn't call for public water island-wide. So I'm just going to clarify that. It also does not call for an island-wide wastewater system or wastewater district. So I'm going to clarify that right now. So until everybody has seen the plan and read the plan and understand what's in it, I don't think that you're at the point where you can determine how you're going to evaluate it. I'm just going to lay that out there.
So I would like to respond to it that I was commenting on the last version of chapter 7 that was available to the public before it went to BFJ. Okay, so if you have some knowledge that's non-public and those things have been taken out, that's fine. But I'm just commenting on what was in the draft of the CP, which was the last one available to the public. So can you comment on this? Were those things removed from the plan now?
Yes, I already said they have been.
Okay. And then I have a follow-up question, if I could ask the town board.
Yes.
Given that the consultants who are present today were extensively involved in preparation of the plan, is this appropriate for the same consultants to be then doing the environmental review of the plan that they prepared? Shouldn't there be an independent agency or independent consultants with serious environmental credentials, but independent from the consultants that prepared the plan to do a secret review?
I think that's something that's on the table when the town board decides to move forward. And, that's why I was trying to figure out timing, because that will be one thing, is who do we want to use for the EAF and the GEIS if we go that route. So that's going to be considered at some future date by this board.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on Zoom with a question? Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I guess my question is that there are other involved agencies that are supposed to review the comprehensive plan for the secret review, like Suffolk County Planning Commission and the Town Planning Board. And I'm wondering when their input on the secret review for part 2 of the EAF will be incorporated into your review of part 2 of the EAF. I mean, it's supposed to be a coordinated review, so everyone who's been listed on part 1 of the EAF at this point should have a say in the determination of significance before you make it. So I guess that's a question. When does all of that paperwork come together in one place and then get reviewed before it goes to the public hearing, I suppose, before you make a determination of significance? Because you're not the only involved agency. Obviously, you're the lead agency, but as I've heard, if Suffolk County Planning Commission sees something awry, I think you need to take that into consideration as well. So it seems like there's a little bit of a coordination problem with that.
I agree with that. And that's one of the things, that's why I'm trying to understand exactly how this timeline works. So the first step is we need to get the plan from CPAC. And then once
Right. And we don't know how long it's, I'm sorry, Amber, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we don't know how long it's going to take to get the final draft now that CPAC has finished their review. Do we have a timeline on that, when the draft will be back to you from them?
We're waiting for the consultants to finish up their work on it. So I don't know if Noah, you have an updated time
I mean,
frame.
I have a draft of it. I'm going over it again to make sure that things are
Mhm.
incorporated. Then there's already some edits I'm gonna send back to Noah. They'll go over it again and then it'll go back to CPAC and then.
And CPAC
So-
did not have any available March dates.
Right,
So
so
it will be
CPAC
April
hasn't
before
weighed in
it's,
We're ready to kind of move on this. We don't want to hold on to it any longer than we need to. So we're ready to move on this and get it back to you as soon as we get it.
And just my original hope was that we would be able to get this comp plan done by the end of September. After today's discussion, I realize that is high in the sky, and so
Not pie.
we will continue to step through the process, but as far as hope to, being done by September 30th, so we could get into next July's grant cycle to get money to hire somebody to look at the zoning changes that might be suggested and overhaul our zoning code is not going to happen in 2025, hopefully 2026. So I'm just putting that out there because I know people are always concerned that we're trying to rush this through. And so I like to set deadlines, but I'm flexible because I like to go that way. Any other questions? No?
Very simple one, Bill Mastro. You just went to what I was going to ask, because the timeline doesn't look like what it was going to be. So as a tangent question to everything, can you start doing some of the code changes review instead of waiting 2 years to do it?
We're going to have to.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we are definitely going to have to.
Next thing on the agenda.
No, I know that one is,
Yes.
but,
Yes.
yeah, because, and as I had said in one of our first meetings, you got a lot of people with a lot of talent here. Maybe get some volunteers to help.
Thank you. Kim Nolan, I see you have your hand up.
So are you going to make the new draft available or the new plan available to the public at the same time as it's made available to the town board? And then start the process of going through it chapter by chapter? I think, Amber, you might have mentioned it probably would be April before that happened.
Correct. Yeah, that's how I would like to see it. I haven't gotten full input from the rest of the board to see if
Yes.
they're in agreement. So,
In agreement.
okay, we got 3 yeses. Albert? Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
and do you have like an idea of, are you just gonna go in numerical order, of the plan's chapters? Would that be like the
Yes,
idea?
that would be,
Okay.
yes, that would be the plan.
Okay.
And also, something that I've stated before, because this will ultimately go to public hearing, the initial working through chapter by chapter will be confined to the town board. Written comments to all of us, grabbing 1 or 2 of us if you want to have a meeting or catching us in the IGA, that kind of stuff. But I don't want to turn each and every work session as we go through this into a public hearing. I lived through part of that when we did short-term rentals, and it was not productive because things come up and we discuss things and we may decide to edit something. So before we get into huge public discourse, which we will have multiple public hearings on this, and we will have, the EIF coming in and all of the, as Pam mentioned, the interrelated agencies. So these will be work sessions for the town board. And also because of, realizing, giving up the hope of getting this done by September, it allows us the time to consider things here at the table and then open it up to the public and then bring it back to the table and continue to step through the process.
Okay, so that's very helpful to kind of understand that timeline. And when you mentioned that, okay, they're not going to be public hearings when you're bringing up these, let's say, the more important chapters, which I think we all know what they are, then you're going to be taking written comments. I think one of the issues while this ramp up to the town board's consideration has been going on has been, you can send in written comments and you can put written comments on the internet, and there's all sorts of ways that the public has input, but and I don't really have a solution, I'm sorry, but you just have no idea what things that that you've asked about, whether they're in or out. So I guess we're left with just keep writing your comments. And then I have like one final question to Meg. So I was just a little confused when you said that certain pretty important things had been changed already in the plan and that we should all just get it and read it. And I'm certainly looking forward to that. But did you say that there was no reference or recommendation regarding an island-wide water district?
So there's a recommendation to evaluate where public water might be needed. What Jan was saying is that it's recommended that we pump public water everywhere on the island, which is not recommended. Creating a water district for parts of the island that are not currently districted in order to maintain home rule is something that's commented on in the plan. But I recommend that you wait until it comes out and then read it and see what you think.
Okay, so the answer is yes, there may still be an island-wide water district in the plan contemplated.
Okay.
Thank you.
My just little add-on to that is sometimes that might be there in one situation that might be a good idea, because when we had Suffolk County Water come in and take over the operation of West Water District, we had a much stronger bargaining position because they were an existing water district. So we may want to consider that, just consider it for the entire island so that we can maintain that control. So I just put that out there because I don't want people to like run away with the idea that we're pumping water all over the place.
Well,
But there's strategic reasons for doing that, perhaps.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to, but honestly, with the Suffolk County Water Authority, what really needs to happen is much stronger legal representation of when they come to us and we know what we're going to let them do with their contracts, which may not have happened in the past. That's at least my opinion, something to look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is,
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, thank you.
No, thank you, guys.
No problem.
Definitely
Help.
helped.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. Part of the discussion. Oh, okay. Do we want to take a 5-minute pause?
Yeah.
Okay, 5-minute pause. We won't turn off the camera. And we are, let's see, 20 minutes off of my schedule. We're 20 minutes behind schedule now.
We should make a requirement that somebody has to have their face on
Also, it's not any kind of final determination, right?
Okay, we ready?
A little louder. You gotta wax weak. Now it's weak. That was weak.
Oh, no, I'll do that when I really.
Don't let me try that.
Just thought I'd get everybody's attention. Are we back? Yep. So back on. All right, good. Okay. So our last agenda item today is the large home legislation. And after we talked about this last week, and we were already reviewing a draft of legislation, thought about it, and because it is a new board that didn't participate in some of the discussions and what, you know, like what, you know, you were on the subcommittee, but then another past board member who's no longer here was part of that group. So rather than diving back into the legislation, we should talk about what is the problem that we're trying to fix? Like, what are we trying to address with this so that we can tailor what we do with legislation and give Stephen guidance that can move us to complete sooner. So, yes, starting off, like, what is the problem? Is it, you know, we just want a cap on, you know, houses that are greater than 6,000 SFLA? Or is it we oversized houses on smaller lots?
Council, we're going to regulate the size, not regulate the size, maybe the better way to say it is make sure that houses aren't too big and are appropriate for their neighborhoods without loophole options. The problem is, you know, the current legislation is kind of a piece of Swiss cheese.
Okay, so size appropriate, neighborhood character. Anything else?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with a large home on a large acreage. I
Right,
feel like
right.
that balances.
Yeah, so
I
that
think
fits
it's more a
under size
problem when you have an oversized home on a small parcel.
Proportionality.
Right.
Because in the draft that we looked at, we did not deal with proportionality.
Right.
And as I started to think about it and start to pick out properties around the island that I would like to take a closer look at, or have, you know, Rick Karen, who's on in the building department, take a look at for us. One of them is, you know, the house on Bowditch Road. It's on 0.7 acres. We say if we just go with strictly a 6,000 SFLA or gross square footage, that's still too big.
Well, we did try to deal with proportionality in the last the draft legislation with the pyramid piece.
Correct.
That's what it does.
Well, it does and it doesn't, because it just shoves it into the middle of the lot. You can still max your build out in the center of the lot as long as you're meeting your setbacks and you're staying within your building envelope. So, I mean, you could still have a 6,000 square foot lot jammed into the center of your property. You know, it does and it doesn't. I mean, I would almost say if the goal is to maintain the character of specific neighborhoods, then you should have some kind of rule that says your house can't be more than like half. Well, okay, so let's say all the homes around you are 2,000 square feet homes. Like you've got 6 2,000 square foot homes that surround your parcel. You want to expand. Okay, so maybe your expansion can't be more than 50% the average size of the homes around you. So you could go up to 3,000 square feet with your expansion, because then it's what you have around you plus 50% of that area. So then it's kind of in keeping with the character of the area. You're not going to end up with something that's so big that it's looming or instantly changes character. And then it would make kind of overdevelopment a slower process. It would prevent things like Montclair that happened where you had tiny homes and then just monster. You know, I don't know. That's just one option. I'm just trying to throw out options because you got a pyramid idea. I mean, that's another option if the goal is to slow down the rate of growth and just the size of structures. So just another idea to add to the mix.
I think a cap is a good thing. It's cut and dry. It's like, there's the number. It eliminates pretty much any arbitrariness. There's always that, well, you know, the size of the property is this or that. There's always a fudge, and it leads to where we were. I don't know, I wasn't on the board, but down a Shore Road. I mean, I think, I don't know, did that come into the board's attention? 12,000 square feet of house and almost 4,000 square feet of structure. And it's like, did that cause the moratorium? Did that say, wait a minute, we got to do something? This is crazy?
Yeah, well, I think the board was concerned about the number of applications for these large out-of-character homes, and, you know,
I think it's a good thing.
No, and I think we discussed the current mechanism to review the homes and its inadequacies. And they decided that we need to have a moratorium, stop it till we have a better process, you know, to review applications for people who want to exceed the square footage of the houses that are allowable pursuant to the code. But getting back to you brought up keeping in character with the community, but that's like one of the things that the zoning board would do. So regardless if you had a sliding scale of houses, or you have a set limit, the zoning board will look at the character of the community to see if that applicant should be able to deviate from the max that they're allowed to build. So I think from what I heard, the last discussion we had, the town board is unanimously supportive of making it an area variance. So now we're talking about whether or not we should just have a hard cap or you should have a sliding scale based on lot size. And I did present that early on. We do have an option that we can develop a floor area ratio, which is a number based on the lot size, and that will dictate how large your home would be. And other municipalities have employed that. Southold recently, and the one I always come back to is the village of Sagaponic, because that village was created because of a large home that was built, the Ira Renner House. That is one of the largest homes in the United States, private home. So they said, enough with this, we're gonna form a village, and the number one thing that we're gonna do is do a floor area ratio. So that's what they utilize. But again, you already have established a hard cap, and the residents know that, the real estate agents know that, the builders know that, this is the hard cap that you can build. And you can just make it where it's a area variance if anyone wants to deviate from it. And we've discussed how they're equipped to do it. But I do get the point where, you know, if you have a 20-acre lot, you should be able to have a larger home. And I'm being, you know, a little facetious, but you can come up with a plan that, based on the lot size, you can have a graduated size of the home. But again, that's, if you want to be strict on large homes, you already have one of the strictest laws in the county, probably, or in the state, at 5,900 square feet.
I mean, I'm in favor of the cap. It takes out the arbitrariness. There's no, well, you know, I have 2.5 acres, and well, it eliminates that. There's enough loopholes in our code right now.
Well,
without putting in another one.
Well, speaking of loopholes, I assume we're all talking about a gross area calculation.
Well, that wasn't,
another question.
That wasn't in the draft legislation that we saw last week. So that.
Yeah, we have a square foot living area in the code, which has to do with finished and conditioned space.
That's nothing but a loophole.
Yeah, no. So I do have a definition that'll be thrown around. That's gross floor area. It's with Reed right now for him to take a look at. So, but that's another question. So the question is, do you want to two questions? Do you want to have a max, and how do you want to define what's within that max? And just for illustrative purposes, a sliding scale based on lot size, I looked at several communities, and one that I like, you know, had it so it was crystal clear, so provided in the legislation, so there's no math to be done by Reed. So it started at 5,000 square feet lot and went up to 80,000 and above. And it had a 10,000 square foot max. But if you start at like a 5,000 square foot lot based on the floor area ratio,
you would be allowed a 2,150 square foot house on a 5,000 square foot lot. When you got to an acre, it was 6,500. So it's sort of in keeping with what we have. And then if you got to 2 acres and above, again, it's 10,000 no matter what.
Gross, right? That's square foot living area.
Right. Theirs is more, no, theirs actually was gross with a bunch of exemptions.
Right.
That made it almost like our square foot living area. But again, we can define it any which way we want to define.
So I had this conversation privately, but my biggest problem with this is the exemptions and the loopholes.
Yeah.
If we don't lock that down with whatever changes we make, what are we doing? So, I mean, we can make it so people can have a nice house if they want one, if they have a big lot. I'm not objecting to any of that, but I am objecting to the back channel ways to go beyond what the boundaries we're trying to set.
No, and like I said, absolutely. The zoning board sits a little bit in equity and looks at what's the most equitable thing to do in a particular situation, and it weighs, the detriment to the community to the benefit of the applicant. So it will look at community character. We'll look at the fact that, you have a 10-acre parcel, and, and what impact to the community would it be if you had a 8,000 square foot house instead of a 5,900, and review that. And so, again, I see your point. It's crystal clear. It's very, 5,999 square foot gross floor area. If you want to exceed that, go to the zoning board. But but then again, why make someone go to the zoning board of appeals when you have a 10-acre lot and you want to just put one single family dwelling on?
If we're going gross, then I think 599.9 is too low.
I can be convinced back on that one. I'm not giving up just now, but.
Because what we look at right now traditionally is a 6,000 square foot house. When you add the attic space, you add the basements, you add all the other structures, it's a 9 or 10,000 square foot home. If you're adding all the floor area and of the garage and everything else, that's what we're calling a 6,000 square foot house now, is a 9 or 10,000 square foot house when you're looking at gross square footage. So that's kind of where I'm coming from that.
I agree with the argument. I'm not sure about the numbers you're citing, but if we don't change it, if we implement this, we're going to make a number of houses automatically pre-existing non-conforming.
Absolutely. That's something that we do have to take into consideration, because then it does put a burden more on town resources, the zoning board, on our clerks, on the building department. So, that's something to take into consideration when we look at how to handle this, is the impacts of it, because it will have an impact on how we function and how the public has to work through, the basic processes of getting permits.
On the other side of that fence, I also don't want to see this as a way to make a 12,000 square foot house okay. but we'll work it out. We'll talk.
Well, I'm not saying that you're getting more it's essentially kind of the same square footage that people are getting now. Only what they're doing is they're just not finishing parts of it, and they're just finishing the 6,000. So if you add the 6,000 plus the unfinished space, it tends to give you about 9,000 to 10,000 square feet. So on the high end, that's what people are doing now.
I agree with the argument.
Convert from SFLA to gross.
Numbers, but I agree
Numbers are high, the numbers are all,
The
I'm
number is
sorry.
around 9,000, easily 9,000.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna argue.
Yeah, if you have a 6,000 square foot house, you've got 3,000 on the first floor, 3,000 on the second floor. If they've got a full basement, you're up to 9,000.
And then if you add a garage, or you have a, pool house, and you're adding all of those things, that adds square footage.
I agree with your argument. I'm not sure about the numbers, but I agree with your argument.
We can nail down the numbers better, but that's just.
That's why, you may want to consider just keeping it as is with square foot living area, 5,999 square feet.
Right.
That maintains the status quo that everybody has grown to live with, and if you need a variance from, make your case.
But I mean, in a conversation that I had with a building inspector, they think 70% of the time someone finishes that extra space, it would push them into. So we haven't closed that loophole.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like the gross living, gross floor area.
No, I know, but the harm that you're looking at with large homes, and from what I've heard since I've been here from the community coming in, is the visual impact of large homes. A lot of people don't care if the basement's finished. It violated the law, yes. But I think that can be cured with more vigorous enforcement. But again, it's the massing of the buildings, not the subterranean use of.
May I say one thing quickly? You say, Stephen, you just said something, and I don't think it's strictly correct. You said that, we would just need more enforcement. The problem is, it's not really a problem, but people have rights, and we would have to get access to these homes, and I don't think, and that would be really, I don't think we want to go there. I think that you don't want to rely on a warrant to verify whether someone has a finished basement or not. And the problem is that we don't find out about these finished basements that were done illegally until the house goes to sell, and we discover that, and then they, an inspection's required by the bank, and then we find out, and then it's a huge problem for everybody because it's messing up a sale. And my only interest in this is just to preclude cheating and to preclude problems that come from trying to game the system. I don't care, it's not that I don't care. I don't think it's my position to weigh in on the policy, but empirically, I know that we have a real problem with people illegally finishing areas of the house the minute they get their C of O.
And that happens.
Just for a second, that was Reed Karen, our chief building inspector.
Okay.
For those who did.
And that's not unique to Shelter Island. Every municipality deals with the same issue. And, in my private life, I represented a ton of people who legally converted their basements, and I had to legalize it for them. And they got tickets because, it comes out. It all comes out in the wash, whether, like you said, when they want to sell the property, if they want to get a rental permit, now we require inspection. So they're going to have to, have a come to Jesus moment at that point.
But the problem is you may well have a basement that's being occupied without emergency escape and rescue openings. It's a fire hazard.
No, absolutely. And then, at that point, it would have to be ripped out. But again, all right, so my bringing up that issue is that we shouldn't be writing law for the exception. We should be writing law for the major harm, which is the massing and the size of the homes that are not in keeping with the character of the island.
Well, one other possibility is if there was a serious fine when someone is caught doing these things. As it is now, if they have to correct it, they have to pay a penalty that's related to the permit. It's not that significant, and it's for a wealthy person with a big house, it's probably worth it to get 10 years of use of an unfinished, of an illegally finished basement, it's sort of amortized over 10 years or 15 years. It's not such a terrible price. If you had a really serious fine, maybe that would be a deterrent. I don't know.
But two problems. You shouldn't write legislation as well to rely on things we historically have not been good at, which is enforcement and fines. And why leave the avenue open for, people doing things illegally? Just incorporate it all. Have it a gross number.
No, but the problem is if you want to address his concerns, then you have to do gross floor area, 5,999 square feet, but then that 5,999 square feet is not big enough. So you're going to have to now to solve the problem, you're going to have to allow larger homes to solve that issue with the basement.
But then with the pyramid law on top of it, it creates more proportionality.
No, absolutely, but you still have to rate, like, it would be unfair to make someone have a house of 5,999 square feet of gross floor.
Oh, no, I'm
This is significantly
agreeing with
smaller.
Meg that the number needs to change. We're just not agreeing on the number.
No, I know, but that's why I'm saying you can keep the status quo if you keep it at square foot living area. And the whole reason we're not doing square foot living area because of the basement issue.
Yeah.
So it's just something to discuss.
Okay.
I mean, you could keep the current SFLA with the less than 6,000 square feet and just make it an area variance and call it a day. And then it's just a matter of putting in penalties for people who break the law and finish things illegally. That's one way to just finish it, just, close the moratorium, be done with it. But if it wants to go to gross square footage, then that's a whole new discussion.
Yes.
Because that opens a whole bunch of
So you're gonna have,
problems, because then you're also like, all right, so then if someone has a garden shed, are we gonna count that in the gross square footage? If it's just storage, no water, no heat, it's literally for tools, like, does that get counted? Or,
but then you run into the issue that it could be
And-
illegally converted after, and then you're back to the same problem.
No, I'm saying include it.
There was a short-term rental that was made
It's
out
like
of it.
a detached garage. That's part of the gross square footage. You can convert it or not convert it, or just park your cars in it.
Yeah, so the decision has to be made if you want to do what Meg just said, just keep it at 5,999 square foot living area variance and more enforcement and fines, or change it to gross floor area and up the size of the home, so you're gonna have to decide on the new cap, or do a floor area ratio based on the lot size. So those are the decisions you have to
I vote cap it, so maybe I'll go get a cup of coffee, while you guys hash it out, I mean, it's simple, it's like there, there's no worrying about gross area being finished at a later date, it's done.
So you're saying
Gross area cap.
gross area cap or square SFLA?
6,999 square feet.
No, but which measurement?
Total.
Total, so
On
gross.
gross, on gross
Total-
floor area.
Total area house. 6,000 square feet.
I like the total gross area calculation. I do agree with Meg that if we go that way, we have to adjust the cap of the 6,000 square feet. I don't think it's 10, but it can't stay at 6.
10 in most places around us.
Well, and then you say it would be like 9.
Yeah.
That'd be
We're
9.
unique.
We could do a calculation of everybody's home so they could see exactly what the square footage you're talking about feels like. I think it's hard. I think maybe it's hard to visualize what we're talking about. And if you're just talking about numbers, it's very abstract.
Yeah, I agree.
When you say doing a calculation of everybody's homes, are you talking about the entire island or just?
Maybe just the people who are
Okay.
people who are voting.
Okay.
Well, I've done this calculation, which is
Well,
to
we could-
generate my opinions, but.
We could pick some other properties that we have questions about
Yes.
too, things that have come before us that seemed like
Inappropriate.
or that were under this SFL, like under the 6,000 square foot cap, but seem large. So we can do that, and see what their square footage came out to. Because there are some houses that didn't require a special permit because they were under the 6,000 square feet, but you look at them and you're like, okay, that's a beast. Well,
But it
what
was
is
under
their
the
square?
6,000 livable, and it's a beast because they have extra buildings
Which
and
is why I'm
studios
saying,
and
let's look at
offices.
what their square footage was, so we understand what that actually means when you look at gross square footage. And then you can look at things, there are some things that required a special permit that don't seem that large. Why is that? So we can look at the square foot of some of these more controversial places and see what it actually was. Because, the one we keep talking about in Ram Island wasn't that much larger than 6,000 square feet with the finished basement. And so then you have some, like, I'll say Pandian down in that area, didn't need a special permit, was under 6,000 square feet, but significantly larger than the house in Ram Island. So looking at what things actually look like when they're built might help give people like a frame of reference.
One thing that's possible too, if you decide that it's too big a lift to go to gross square foot living area, refining the definition of square foot living area as we have it now would be another possibility, because part of the problem is my only interest in this is to not waste so much time arguing over, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin with architects and homeowners and things, and doing things that are unverifiable or easy to gain.
And most municipalities do that. They have like this more broader gross floor area, but then with a bunch of exemptions. And I know Ed doesn't like that, but they'd exempt like decks, patios, unenclosed porches, porticos, basement cellars, and basement garage. However, they go into basements and certain types of basements, yes, no, attics, yes, no. So you can get very complex with the definition. So
We want to, keep it simple. We want to keep it as
simple. The KISS is exactly what we have now and send it over for variance. That's the most simple way to address this.
What do you want to do, Max?
Well, I mean, that's the simplest way to do it. Just keep it the way it currently is and send it for an area variance. Everybody understands the standard. Once we start changing how we calculate it, gross versus SFLA, then it's going to get complicated. And then that's where, as Al says, it might get arbitrary. But I also feel like it doesn't necessarily address the large homes on small lots. So that if that's something that we feel is a problem, is having oversized homes on small lots, then that's a different conversation.
We could have a separate.
The listing, the standards they're crazy. What'd you say? A fifth of an acre could have a 3,000 square foot house in our code? I mean, that's.
You don't have any buildable lots.
Or whatever. I don't know what the.
So, but that could be that could be something separate from this large home. I mean, the large home moratorium was for things that were requiring special permits because they were excessive, and that was what we were trying to solve. So if we need to close out the moratorium, changing it to an area variance and leaving the current standard would do that.
Well, I don't think you can leave the current standard because you have to add in fines and enforcement because people are gaming the system right now for no cost. So, and there's no reason to avoid the proportionality question. If you're going to do it, might as well fix that too. And that's easily fixed with the pyramid law.
Correct. We could do the pyramid and the current SFLA, send it for 5,999 square feet, send it for an area variance, and also increase the fines in the section of the code, the zoning code.
Yeah, I still have some questions about the pyramid law because I know it's going to create a lot of nonconformity. Just because our side yard setbacks in C zone are 10 feet. So anything that's built within 30 feet or 35 feet of the side yard or the property line is going to be non-conforming. So, I feel like
You could exempt the C zone from the pyramid.
Right.
Okay, I thought it was.
Because then you could just do A and double A. But, well, I mean, double A already has a 30 foot.
It's 35.
It's 30 foot, so it already is conforming. Yeah, so then you would just be picking on the A zone.
If that's only 5.
And it's, I was gonna say, it's.
No public comment. Sorry.
I made maps for myself.
Yeah.
When you're ready, you can hear from a member of the public who's a builder.
Because this is something that's gonna go to a public hearing.
Oh, so we don't.
We're not doing public discussion because there will be a public hearing for the public hearing. trying to.
You could, the one exception, you could invite a member of the public who would speak in his expert capacity, not taking a position, but if you had any objective questions.
That's why Reed is here.
No,
So,
I will say that the project that currently is going on that's creating the most problems for neighbors is in C zone. It's the house on Bowditch.
right.
And the pyramid law is really to offer some sort of protection for neighbors. And I guess for the what's sort of euphemistically called the the character of the neighborhood. It doesn't address septic load, it doesn't address all those things. And there are some houses that appear to be huge that don't have that much square foot living area. The modernist house that's just gone up recently on Little Ram appears to be about a 20,000 square foot house, but it's all air. They've got a huge living room that's just got walkways around it. It's funny how it's deceptive sometimes, what appears to be a big house and doesn't have a lot of square foot living area.
Again, but leaving, it just feels that by leaving the standard where it is, we're still just inviting gaming in the system.
Yeah, that's my concern. That's why I liked the gross floor area.
Yeah.
And when you were working on the subcommittee, you did do some sort of an analysis of
Yeah, I started trying to figure out, it's really a challenge to do because the assessor's data doesn't include basements, and accessory structures are on a different data set than primary residence. So it's really hard to take all the information and synthesize it into a total square footage for a lot, which is what I was attempting to do. But 3,700 lots later, my eyes started to go swirly, and I didn't quite get to merge all the spreadsheets. But I was able to break it down into, how many 8-acre lots do we have left? How many 4-acre lots do we have left? So you can kind of see what would the impact be. And I think we had something like 6 lots that were over 8 acres left on the island, and something like 10 lots that are 4 acres or larger. I have to find the numbers, but there aren't a lot of large lots left. So really, I think more of the impact is going to be on the smaller lots in the more residential areas. So
That's where you want it to be too.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if it's developed or not developed, because we see, tear downs on existing lots.
Right, that's what I'm
So
saying.
the build out is great, potential build out or build up or whatever you want to call it is great, because someone buys a cottage and just knocks it down in Montclair and builds something huge.
Something not in keeping with the character of the
Yes.
area.
So I just want to remind everybody, we're on the clock because we have a moratorium, and we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, and we can always do a subsequent amendment. So I think just getting it from special permit to area variance is a win. It makes the code better. Now, pyramid, we could also adjust to, there's some townships that start from 10 feet above grade, and then, so you may want to say, all right, in the C zone, it's 10 feet above grade for pyramid. And again, that's not to say they can't build what they want to build. Because the ZBA look at the hardship that they're going through, that they have such a narrow lot, all the lots surrounding it narrow, they are all piercing the pyramid anyway, the neighbors. So likely they can make a case for successful area variance in those specific situations.
Yeah, we're just pushing them to an appeal. That's all.
Which
Most everything in the Heights goes to appeal anyways.
Yeah.
So these would be, we would do the two of them, the pyramid and the area variance. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's
in conjunction with.
Yes.
Could we fix the fines too?
And increase the fine. Because I would love to, tell the Suffolk County Planning Commission, because we're asking for 3 months, that, hey, we're almost there, and we have something that we're gonna do, and because again, there were applicants that got stuck in this process that were looking to proceed, and in fairness to them, if we have something that's almost there, we should probably just pass it, and then, again, be tweaked, months after if you see something that's not working.
Yeah, makes me more gross too.
And we're gonna have to empirically come up with another number.
Right. Yeah.
That's the difficult part.
You don't like my numbers, but they're actually realistic. So, you know what? We'll see. Think about it. I don't know.
Yeah, so how do we want to proceed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Like question, Amber.
Yeah.
I can prepare based on keeping it SFLA for now, and making it an area variance, increase fines in the pyramid, and I don't know if you want 10 feet in C, 10 feet from grade in C.
I would think for C zone, yeah. And, my other thing is with the B and the B1 zone, I don't know that we should do a pyramid for that. I mean, they're tight lots already. And it does have design guidelines on what you're allowed to do in B and B1. I don't know if it needs a pyramid.
Or maybe we can maybe look at it both ways, which is do the gross with the pyramid, and you and I can sit down and see if we can meet on some sort of common
Well,
ground.
you're gonna have to get Albert.
Well, Al's got it.
That's all right.
Oh, yeah, that's true. He's 5,999.
He's stuck at 6, so. But, because I just think so many other problems are solved by using a gross standard.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree. It's just a matter of determining the appropriate number.
Yeah.
But that only also solves new construction. So you can have houses that are 5,500 square feet and finish their basement. And they'll be illegal. They'll be over the square footage or, so you're only talking about new construction.
That's true.
Or anybody who
Who
does something
that
else.
and won't have fines and.
Who comes for a variance because they want to add a bedroom or something, or a studio.
No, but what we were talking about with gross floor area is to fix the problem permanently, because we're gonna give you 5,999 square feet or whatever it is, it's gonna be higher. Let's say 9,000 of gross floor. So whatever you wanna do, have at it. If you wanna finish it, finish it. If you don't wanna finish it, finish it. So you're within this envelope.
Okay, so they need to go to the building department to get a building permit to finish it, but then.
But they won't exceed, because
you're.
correct, because you already created the envelope of the house. So you're not gonna necessarily be able to exceed the square footage max by illegally converting it, because you're already got that. But again, that's just for new, not for pre-existing. And
Well, pre-existing gets
No, 'cause that's-
covered, because if they go finish their basement.
how are you gonna find out?
Yeah, but if it's under the number, we don't care. And if it's above the number, at some point, you're gonna find out these things.
Well, that's the same with new construction. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so you two are gonna work on a number for gross
I mean,
floor area.
Yeah, the other thing to think about too, though, when it comes to that is, if you're giving someone a larger gross area, how do I explain this well? All right, I have a picture. This is the way I roll. So I know not everyone can see this. So this is a C-zone lot with, 10-foot side yards, 30-foot front yard setback. So you could have a 6,000 square foot house that's 60 by 100, 1 story, no basement, on a slab, giant beast, right? Or you can have a 2-story with a full basement that's 50 by 40. Significantly different impacts on the lot when it comes to visuals and what you see. So, going to gross square footage, okay, now you can have, if we increase the number to say 9,000 square foot, you can have a 90 by 100 massive one-story on a slab beast, and that would meet code. So these are things that we have to, even with the pyramid law, you can shove that thing right in the middle and it'll fit.
Caesar.
Doesn't matter. It's not gonna, like, depending on the size of the lot, you can still have a massive,
No,
you
but height
know,
restrictions.
35 feet, same
Yeah.
height restrictions everywhere. I mean, we already have a standard 35-foot height
No,
for a
but the height
roof.
restrictions are limited, well, the width of the building is limited by the angle
Right, so if you have this 200 front footage
up to the, okay.
C-zoned lot, which is totally doable, it's 40,000 square feet, you can have these situations. So it's just something to look at. So a minimum frontage for a C-zone is a 100 square foot frontage. If you have 100 square foot frontage, you could have a nice long thing going right down the middle that maxes out your building envelope. So
But your building envelope's gonna leave you with very large side yards, which will.
yeah, but it won't
Good
affect your
proportionality
coverage. I
of the
mean,
That's why the pyramid piece is necessary.
yeah, right. Depends on the shape of your lot, really, on how much impact a pyramid is really gonna have. If you have a narrow lot, it's gonna have far more impact than if you have a more
Yes.
square lot.
Absolutely. 100%.
So, and just keep into account, we have the public hearings are gonna be in connection
Oh,
with
yeah.
this. So, we gotta plan that accordingly for timing and stuff. So you might as well get something after the public hearing.
Yes. Yeah, because when I was building in the timeline, I had setting the public hearing, having the public hearing, going back to the drawing board, setting another public hearing, having a public hearing, and hoping that we could get this all done in 3 months. So I had factored in an extra public hearing.
I mean, I'm okay with going with the current, standards, increasing enforcement, increasing fines. But it's less attractive to me than the gross square footage.
We can revisit.
I'm just trying to think of all the potential side effects.
Yeah, no, unintended
I mean,
consequences.
you could
Yeah.
have,
Yeah, in my current game plan, I had setting reviewing legislation next week, setting a public hearing on the 18th, having the public hearing April 15th, back to the drawing board.
Maybe we won't have to do the back to the drawing.
Possibly, but yes. I just figured it's a controversy on that topic.
And what's your legal advice on this? A or B?
What my major concern was the mechanism, and that was going from special permit to variance. So from a legal perspective, that's, now this comes down to policy. But to me, I think it's also, the fact that we already have the 5,999 square foot with the square foot living area, and it's, everyone already has been living by that. That would make sense to keep that and try to address the consequences of people, illegally converting things with more enforcement, higher fines, and then again, some massing with the pyramid. I think you solve a lot of the problems, that you don't have to take that next heavy step of the gross floor area. Because again, most municipalities don't have a very strict gross floor area. There's a million exceptions to it.
Right. Most would exempt things like garden sheds, pool houses, detached garages that are unfinished, like not living space. Like there's a list of exemptions for most places.
I prefer to put it all in.
Yeah, so do I, because you want to do density
You know,
and all sorts
And
of.
also, if we get, what is a bedroom? People will start renaming things, and making arguments, oh no, this is excluded because it's this, and it's not really this.
I have a detached garage, and that, normally that would be excluded, but it should be all in, everything.
Yeah.
So Ben, what do you think the number should be for gross? You don't like my number, you gotta have a number in your head.
7,500. Nothing's in my head, man. But we should.
Yeah, we should talk, yeah. We'll start with that, so to see. I've got a few houses that I'm gonna pull for examples, and maybe we can see what it does with them.
And we don't, to survive legal scrutiny on this, again, we can't be too arbitrary. That's why I think if we're gonna change the number, that we have empirical data from the building department, or I don't know how we get it on square footage of houses and what the average is on Shelter Island.
I can tell you that's incredibly difficult to do. I've been trying for the last.
It's just incredibly hard to do. Because the assessor's data, it has it all broken out into different places, doesn't include basements. It's just very challenging to do accurately. And
But I think, again, if the intent is the size of the home that you can visually see, then you don't really need to take into basements. And so if we can get the average square footage of the house proper, then that might be able to be a starting point.
But we still haven't fixed the problem of illegal basement conversions done without building permits, and then you got.
But then you'd have to add on square
But then
footage
you've
for
got-
basements.
You'd have to add on, like, you get your basic base number of the average home on the island, and then you have to add to it. So you'd have to add what a basement would be, what an attic would be, because an attic has to be included in that square footage. You'd have to add,
It's not a simple task.
I know, but the reaction people had to the homes that were approved were from what they can see.
Right.
So I'm just saying, to get an average of a house on Shelter Island, the average house size, without, again, the basement, without attic, whatever you can visually see. I think that is what you need to look at as far as setting a number.
Okay. I might actually thought something like that.
It's not, I'm just maybe suggesting maybe the board talk to like an architect. Somebody like,
An engineer.
This is wrong.
And we're not opening this up to public, sorry. You can send us. Send an email to us. We're taking comments that way.
You can ping the town board.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so.
It's my suggestion that unfortunately go on for the next work session. And we continue the conversation.
We got so many things to get to. Let's just put this through, give it to the ZBA, and then we can always come back to it, right? Can we do that?
Yes, we can. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying, have the number be 6,000, have it just be living area, condition and whatever they call it, SFLA. And increase the fines
And move it to ZBA.
and move it to ZBA.
And pyramid, if you
And
want.
the pyramid law for new construction, yeah.
That's a start.
It's better than nothing. It's
Mhm.
better than kicking this down the road for another month.
And it's the most expedient,
Correct.
which is what we need right now.
Yep. We could arguably ask for another extension of the moratorium, but that's just not.
Because we have applications pending out there.
I watched that video of that meeting. They didn't look like they were open to doing that.
No, we could override them though.
Okay.
Okay. Your call, Madam Supervisor.
No, it's four of us, 3 out of 4 of us need to agree. So, okay, so you know what you're proceeding with.
I'll
then.
draft something.
Yeah, it's
We
just
can-
to speak to what you've already given us.
Yeah, I'll draft what we have and you can discuss it at the next one.
Yes.
I don't like it, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Well, that's how you know it's a good compromise.
All right. Around the table.
I don't have anything.
I have the comprehensive plan. So we gave the consultants all the
comments and edits from the CPAC, and Noah went through and made a whole bunch of changes and sent it back to me. I'm looking over it again. I've already found a few more edits and corrections, so we're going to go over those, and then I'm going to send it back to Noah. He'll make the tweaks when it comes back. Unless there's something glaringly wrong, I'm sending it to the CPAC. CPAC will review it, and then from there, if they think it looks good, then send it here to the town board, and the town board will start their review. So hopefully that should be in the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping to finish reading through it by the end of this week and just making any adjustments that either got missed when you went through it, or I'm finding just typos and stuff. And then, so hopefully by April, it'll be ready for the town board. That's the goal there. Got a meeting with PSCNG to talk about E-tip on Thursday, so that's coming up. That's kind of it for me. Mine is fast and short. Easton Supervisors and Mayors Association, we met last week. Took Joe Fenora with me because one of the topics was the MS4 program, and Michael Collins, the Southfield town engineer, was talking about it. Joe's on it. No need to talk further on that. One other takeaway was when we were looking at giving priority to housing, Stony Brook University was there, and they just asked all of the towns to consider healthcare professionals giving priority to housing because they're having trouble attracting talent to the East End. So just toss that out there, and I'll mention it to Community Housing Board at the next meeting. That's it.
I did not have a committee that met last week. So there you go.
Okay, so we will adjourn the regular meeting and go into a special meeting so that we can do the resolution for the opioid epidemic. So, good. So I have the waiver of notice that needs to be signed. So I'll just quickly read this. The title is Adopted Resolution. Well, no, I'm not going to read that. Whereas the misuse of an addiction to opioids, including prescription pain relievers, heroin, and synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, which has defined the opioid epidemic, is a serious national crisis that affects public health as well as social and economic welfare. Whereas New York and the rest of the country are 5 years into an opioid public health emergency, and whereas in 2021, the number of deaths from drug poisoning surged to nearly 107,000 nationally and more than 5,800 in New York State, whereas in 2022, the CDC estimates that 110,757 people lost their lives to drug poisonings in the United States, and more than 400 lives were lost to drug poisonings in Suffolk County alone. Whereas every day, approximately 300 people die from drug poisoning nationally, and whereas the scourge has hit home, and within the subject 5-year opioid emergency, we had 4 Islander fatalities, and Narcan had to be employed 15 times. Whereas despite this unfortunate reality, state legislation in New York has lagged behind in addressing same. Whereas on January 8th, 2024, Suffolk County District Attorney Raymond A. Tierney traveled to Albany and unveiled a proposed legislative package to attempt to respond to the crises. Whereas in sum, the legislative initiatives include 1, seeking to hold drug dealers culpable for manslaughter or aggravated manslaughter for deaths caused by overdose. 2, seeking to afford judges the discretion in imposing bail for those who possess or sell fentanyl in amounts less than 8 ounces. Possession/sale is only bail eligible right now if the charge involves 8 ounces or more, and it is estimated that 113,410 people may be killed by 8 ounces of fentanyl, which is equal to the size of a cup of coffee. Thus, much smaller amounts need to be bail eligible. 3, seeking to make xylazine or tranq, an animal tranquilizer, a controlled substance, which is a new illegal drug additive, which accounted for 15% of the overdoses in 2023. And 4, seeking to make overdose victims' families eligible for victim compensation. Whereas the town board of the town of Shelter Island desires to support Suffolk County District Attorney Raymond A. Tierney's public campaign, and now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Shelter Island hereby strongly supports Suffolk County District Attorney Raymond A. Tierney's efforts for a change in the New York State law to, and again, the 4 items, hold drug dealers culpable, for judges' discretion, tranq, overdose victims. Resolved that the town board of the town of Shelter Island applauds District Attorney Raymond A. Tierney in championing this most important cause, and be it further resolved that the town board of the town of Shelter Island authorizes the supervisor to sign any and all documents which support Suffolk County District Attorney Raymond A. Tierney's public opioid campaign and efforts. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. So we will I'll entertain a motion to close the special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So back to the work session. Any last comments from the public?
I went to Burt Wave, 9 North Ferry Road. I went to the WMAC meeting or two ago, and I was talking about the mooring fees that were raised at the last administration. And there's already a mechanism in place for at the town dock that town boards have granted a discount to baymen or those who possess DEC licenses for commercial fishing. And I was wondering if you would consider applying that to those of us that are commercial fishing, but also use moorings, because we can't keep all our boats at the town dock. Either we have one slip or we don't have any, or we're using a different part of the harbor to fish. And we have multiple boats, and sometimes it's very helpful to keep several of them in the water at a time for different activities. So, the fees add up quite a bit for us. And, we're just in a little bit of a different economy, the fact that we're, working on the water than working, from the city or something coming out here, just a different scale. So I was wondering if you could possibly adjust those fees for those of us that can prove that we land fish or shellfish and, possess the permits to operate in New York State. Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else? Then I would like a motion to go into executive session to discuss the employment history of an employee.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.